Hey guys, welcome to MacReddit. Today, I have compiled some of the most interesting Reddit stories for you. Let's dive into them, without wasting any time. AITA for not inviting my brother to my wedding after he ruined my engagement party? Hey everyone, I, 28F, am getting married in a few months, and there's some drama in the family about my decision not to invite my brother, 31M, to the wedding. Here's what happened. My fiance, 30M, and I have been together for 5 years, and we recently got engaged. We threw an engagement party to celebrate with close friends and family. My brother has always had a bit of a competitive streak with me, but I never thought it would be a problem during such an important event. At the party, after a few drinks, my brother decided to make a big announcement. He and his girlfriend, 29F, are also engaged. The timing was awful. He made his announcement in the middle of my speech thanking everyone for coming. People started congratulating him, and the focus completely shifted to him and his fiancée. I felt like my special moment was taken away. It wasn't just me. My parents and friends were also upset with how he handled it. They thought it was super inappropriate to steal the spotlight at my engagement party. My fiancé and I ended up leaving early, feeling embarrassed and hurt. Later, I confronted my brother, and he just shrugged it off, saying he didn't think it was a big deal and that it was just a party. When I told him how hurt I was, he brushed it off and said I was being overly sensitive. He never apologized, and since then, our relationship has been strained. Now that we're planning the wedding, I've decided not to invite him. When my parents found out, they were furious, saying that I was being petty and that family should come first. They think it's not fair to exclude him from such an important event, even though they also acknowledged that what he did was wrong. Some of my friends are on my side, saying I have every right to decide who comes to my wedding. But others think I'm overreacting and should let it go for the sake of family peace. My fiancé supports my decision, but he doesn't want me to regret it later. So, AITA for not inviting my brother to my wedding after what he did at my engagement party. OP is not an AH for not inviting her brother to her wedding. OP's brother is an AH, a big AH for stealing the spotlight at her engagement party by announcing his own engagement. OP's reaction is justified, and she is not overreacting here. So, for scores, I would rate OP's brother 2.5 and OP 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now move on to the next story from Throwaway 8632, 47732, where OP refuses to take in his pregnant daughter, who abandoned him for her toxic mom. My daughter left me to stay with her mom and ignored me. AITA for not talking to her after she came back to me pregnant. I raised my 24-year-old daughter on my own. I had my daughter when I was very young. I was 19. Her mom broke up with me and said she doesn't want to be responsible for a child, and I had her full custody. My ex gave up her rights to her daughter and left who knows where. It was really hard for me to raise her and take care of her. Thankfully, my sister and my mom helped me taking care of her when I was working. But still, it was hard for me taking care of my daughter, working and doing chores and other stuff all on my own. For her, I even sacrificed dating or marriage. I didn't want my daughter to have a stepmom or anything like that. My daughter's and her mom's relation started flourishing 2 years ago. Her mom visited me and said she wanted to talk to her daughter. I didn't want to allow her, but I thought my daughter needs to know about her mom. They have gotten closer and hang out a lot. I didn't have a problem with that, but 10 months ago, my daughter said she wants to go live with her mom. I refused. I told her it's better she just stays with me and visit her mom every day if she wants. But my daughter didn't listen to me. She said she's an adult and can do whatever she wants. I tried explaining and told her repeatedly that my ex is not a good person, but my daughter didn't listen to me. After she left, I wasn't in contact with my daughter for all these months. I tried, but she would deny meeting me and always tell me she's busy or other excuses, and we only talked to each other on the phone. But 5 days ago, my daughter visited me, and she was crying. I was angry at her for ignoring me for all this time, but I took her in. She hugged me right away, and after a while she told me the truth. She told me that she's pregnant, and her mom kicked her out after she ran out of money I gave her. I was so shocked because I didn't even know my daughter had a boyfriend, but now my daughter is pregnant. I love my daughter very much. Even if she has betrayed me, I couldn't just deny her entry to my house. I let her in. She is staying with me once again, but I do not talk to her. She told me she found out that she's pregnant a month ago, And after she told her mum, she was kicked out after a lot of taunting for days, and her ex-BF doesn't want to take care of her child, so she needs my legal help. I told her I will help her with everything. But do not talk to me. I said, I did everything for you, sacrificed everything for you. But you didn't even come back to your home or meet your father, even once. I haven't been talking to my daughter ever since she came back. She, on the other hand, is depressed and suddenly turned back into a 9-year-old. She would randomly hug me and come to my side to sleep. And while sleeping, she hugs me and cry, and I feel like she wants her father's comfort, so I hug her back and let her sleep. My daughter begs me to talk to her and says that she needs her father, but I think I should punish my daughter for just abandoning me. That's why I'm giving her silent treatment, though I will help her with everything else. Am I wrong for being upset with my daughter? OP is not an AH here. Her daughter is an AH for leaving her father and returning to her toxic mother, who abandoned her during childhood. OP's daughter, instead of praising his continuous efforts, left him alone. She deserves the silent treatment from OP after returning to him. As for the score, I would rate OP's daughter 2 out of 5 and OP 0 on the AH scale. Let's now jump onto the next story from Kexty, where OP hesitate to reconcile to his brother again after he abandoned him when OP needed him the most. AITA, for not wanting to get close again to my brother after he abandoned me when I needed him the most. When I was 12-year-old, I told my parents that I had been sexually abused by a family member for 6 years, 4 to 10. Obviously, they were not happy and asked if I wanted the police involved. I said yes, but because this was the patriarch of the family, I don't blame them. They chose to do the opposite. They've never experienced this before. So after, life went on, and I continued seeing this person until I was 15. Nobody knew about it except my parents, until I eventually broke down one day and demanded law enforcement be involved. At this point, I told another family member about it, and how it affected me mentally, only to find out that he did the exact same thing to her. So now the secret is out, and everybody knows that we've started the court process except one person. My brother. My brother and his family lives a few hours away, and my father didn't feel it was something to tell him over the phone, so we let him know we needed to speak, and would be there the next day. 5 minutes on the road, and my brother called saying we didn't need to come, and he already knew what was happening. He is a detective with his local PD, and had looked up our last names and saw the charges before we could talk to him. Since that day, he wanted nothing to do with us, even though he would tell me and his other siblings that he wasn't abandoning us, but the older people in the family. But since that day, all we got was Christmas texts and the occasional HBD. I asked him to come to my HS graduation, and he rejected. He was so gone that I'd stay up at night and wonder if he would even come to my funeral. Well, last year, 2023, after 6 years of no real communication, he apologized to everyone for how he reacted and wanted all of us back in his life. He let us know that he had 3 kids we never knew about and wanted us to come over and see them. So of course we did. We were excited. I've seen him 2 times since then. My family has been way more. Now that the excitement is over, I now find myself mad. He has made no effort to make the few-hour trip to our house even once. It's always us that has to come to him. He still doesn't text me, only the adults. He has never actually talked to me about everything that happened, just sorry. Essentially, in my head, I'm thinking, you abandoned me when I needed my big brother the most. I've wanted our relationship to be back to normal the past 6 years, but couldn't because you didn't want that. But now that you want one, I have to come running? I feel like an AH because everyone around me wants me to go with them to his house, because they want his kids to know their aunt, but I can't get past all the shit I've been through and how I was abandoned at the worst possible time. I also feel like shit because I'm so close to my other nephew, but not his kids. I want a relationship, but at the same time, it's been 6 years, and, as brutal as it sounds, I convinced myself he died because that was easier to digest than being abandoned. So, AITA, because I feel this way, and I'm not ready to act like nothing happened. AITA for not wanting to get too close to him or his kids, in fear he could abandon me again at the drop of a hat. AITA for now being the one to maybe deny the relationship. OP is not an AH here. His family, including his parents and brother, abandoned him during a traumatic time in his life. His brother, who is a detective and should have been there to help him, barely contacted him. So, I would rate OP's brother 2.5 and his parents 3.5 out of 5 on the AH scale, and OP gets 0. Let's now move on the next story from Pineapple Senior 4105, where after his divorce with his wife, OP enter into a relationship with his ex's best friend. When OP's ex-wife learned about it, she accused him of cheating him during their marriage, and it creates a dilemma for their children. Would I be an a-hole if I proposed a girl who was my ex-wife's ex-best friend? My future wife Sarah is wonderful. I met her 1 year after I met my ex-wife. I've always admired Sarah. She was always an upright and honest person, fighting for minorities, volunteering for associations, and was also very funny. She and my ex were great friends. But Sarah kept her distance from me when I wanted to get to know her. But over the years, we became very good friends. Then, 7 years ago, my ex-wife Martha, 38F, cheated on me with a colleague of hers. I had my doubts, so I asked Sarah, 36F, if she knew anything about it. She told me she didn't know anything. I did my research and found proof of my ex's affair, and to top it all off, this colleague came to our house from time to time with other people, so he knew my family. I left Martha directly, and it was a difficult ordeal, especially for my daughter Lily, 15F. During this ordeal, Sarah was really a shoulder for me. She cut ties with my ex, and as I had nowhere to go after the divorce, she refused to let me spend my money in hotels and allowed me to stay at her place. All my other friends were married, and I didn't want to disturb them, and my family lives too far away. Sarah was very patient with me and always listened to me. When my ex heard I was living with Sarah, she laughed and said she wasn't surprised. I asked her what she meant, but she didn't answer. My daughter came to visit me and was extremely unpleasant with Sarah. I had asked her why, and she told me that her mother had told her that the reason we had divorced was that I was in love with Sarah. I was furious and phoned my ex. She told me not to pretend and that she knew I had feelings for Sarah. I didn't want to hear any more and hung up. It had been years since I'd felt the need to finish my work and find the person I loved, and with Sarah, I was always looking forward to coming home. One night, we slept together and became a couple. Things went very fast as Sarah got pregnant, and we had our son Caleb, 5M. When my son was born, Lily became surprisingly calm and got on very well with him, even though she was always so disagreeable with Sarah. To this day, Lily adores Caleb and even overprotects him. When she's at home, and I scold Caleb for something stupid, she gets very angry and decides to take him with her and lock herself in her room with him. It's hard to spend time with my son when Lily's around because she monopolizes him, but Sarah says I should be happy that Lily loves Caleb. 1 week ago, I proposed to Sarah and she said yes. When my ex found out that Sarah and I were getting married, she came to our house furious. Fortunately, Sarah wasn't there at the time. My ex told me she was disgusted that I had used Sarah's altruism to push my sick obsession with her. I shot back that she was crazy and that I didn't know what she was talking about. Martha said that throughout our marriage, all I could think of was Sarah's name, that every time I did a favor for someone in need, I justified it by saying that Sarah would have done the same thing, that I never gave to associations that help minorities, but when I learned that Sarah had made a donation, I did the same, that I wasn't even interested in the BLM movement, but for Sarah I was an expert, that during our evenings with friends, I always sought her gaze, and that I smiled like a child when she was around, and the times I refused her. She told me I didn't need to say why, and that she was doing it on purpose to suggest a meeting with Sarah, and to see my reaction when she told me the three of us had something planned. Every time she asked for, I refused, saying I had to save energy for the next day. I just told her she was crazy, and I told her to leave because she was going to wake up my son, at which point she laughed and said that I'd never been afraid of waking Lily up when she was little, but that for the child I had with Sarah, I treated him differently from my daughter, especially as I'd always wanted to have a boy, and the fact that it was Sarah who gave me my first son was something else I had to put on my list where I put Sarah's exploits. I was furious and told her to get the hell out of my house. I never told Sarah that Martha had come to make a scene. More importantly, I admit that I admired Sarah very much, but I never saw it as an obsession. Above all, I never imagined myself married to Sarah when I was with Martha, and it's true that I always wanted a son, but I also love Lily. She's the one who cheated on me, so why am I the bad guy? I really wonder if I'm the asshole. OP is not an AH for proposing to her ex-wife's ex-best friend. Instead, OP's ex-wife is an AH who cheated on her husband, and now her accusations seem to be baseless, and that now OP has every right to come into a relationship with anyone. OP's ex is being entitled. So I would rate OP's ex-wife 2, and OP 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's move on to the next story from Frustrated Koala. 42069, where OP refuses to accept his entitled ex-girlfriend's apology, who left him for her friend. AITA for refusing my ex-girlfriend apology and calling her struggles karma for choosing her manipulative friend over me. I'm 28M, who was dating Kelly, 27F, for 3 years, planning to propose with an engagement ring and a luxury vacation. However, her best friend, Nat, 27F, was always a problem. From the start, Nat disliked me and tried to break us up by falsely accusing me of cheating and convincing Kelly I was controlling. This caused many arguments, but Kelly always defended Nat. In January 2024, I reached my limit. We were celebrating my birthday, and Kelly invited Nat despite my objections. Nat dominated the conversation, talking about her financial issues. I asked Kelly to intervene, but when she tried, Nat accused her of not caring and then attacked me, calling me controlling. I lost my temper, calling her a manipulative bitch. Nat physically assaulted me, leaving bruises. The day was ruined, and back home, I gave Kelly an ultimatum, either me or Nat. Kelly argued it was unfair to make her choose. We fought, and when Kelly said I provoked Nat by insulting her, I told her to leave. After threatening to call the cops, she finally left. I packed all of Kelly's belongings, including everything I had bought for her since she had lived off my money for 2 years. I texted her to pick up her things, and when she arrived, I handed them over without speaking. Later, Nat texted, calling me a jerk for keeping the gifts. Kelly also texted, calling me stingy. Angry, I sent her photos of the expensive engagement ring and vacation tickets I had bought to show what she missed out on because of Nat. Then, I blocked her. In September, Kelly showed up at my place looking awful and begged me to take her back. She admitted she had made a huge mistake. After we broke up, she got her own apartment, but realized how manipulative Nat was. Nat kept guilt-tripping her into giving her money, and eventually moved in with Kelly after getting evicted. Things got worse. Nat started using drugs, invited shady people over, and Kelly noticed cash and valuables, including her grandmother's necklace, were stolen. When she confronted Nat, Nat physically assaulted her, and 2 days later, Kelly was evicted because of Nat's behavior. Now homeless, jobless, and broke, Kelly apologized, saying she would do anything to get back together. I felt a sense of satisfaction and told her it was karma for choosing Nat over me. I asked her to leave, threatening to call the police if she didn't. Kelly told mutual friends, and they think I was too harsh given her situation. They suggest I apologize or even consider taking her back. Now, I'm conflicted. Should I apologize to keep the peace with my friends? Or am I justified in not taking her back or apologizing? AITA? Edit 1. Thanks for all your opinions and suggestions. I've decided to talk to Kelly once and for all and tell her to leave me alone. I'm going to apologize for taking pleasure in her misery, not to please my friends, but just because I want to get over with this as soon as possible. I've set up a meeting at a busy public place tomorrow. I also took the advice of my elder sister. I've always turned to her for advice. I'll update and let you guys know how the talk goes. I'm hoping to close this chapter of my life forever. Peace. OP is not an AH, and his being harsh is 100% justified. OP's ex-girlfriend is opportunistic, and OP decision to not reconcile with is in the right. Preferring mental peace over toxic relationship is the best choice. In fact, OP's ex is an entitled AH. So, I would rate her 2 out of 5 on the AH scale, and OP 0. Let's now move to another story from Sudden Traffic 9539, where OP demands that CL have no access to their newly born child because of her cold and dismissive behavior towards her. AITA, for telling my husband that his sister will not meet our baby if she does not start to respect me. First time here, but I really need an outside opinion. Bear with me. My husband's sister has been cold towards me for the past 2.5 years that I've known her. I feel that I have gone above and beyond to be kind to her and make her comfortable with me. She can be shy, which is his excuse for her behavior. but we'll get into that. She does not speak to me unless spoken to. Not a hi or a bye, even at my own apartment. When my husband and I eloped, I didn't get a congratulations from her. On my birthday, she called my husband to chat. He mentioned that we were on our way to dinner for my birthday. No happy birthday from her. When we found out that I was pregnant, she was the first person my husband told. I didn't hear from her. She came to visit us 3 weeks later. Again, walked into our apartment without acknowledging me, and did not congratulate me or ask about the pregnancy at all while she was here. To add to that, I was extremely sick with a condition called hyperemesis gravidarum. It's like morning sickness, but on steroids. I had been in the ER days prior and continued to vomit every hour. She was aware of this before coming over. There was no acknowledgement from her, and I was treated like I didn't exist. In the past, I have asked my husband if he was aware of any issues she had with me. Maybe I said or did something that she didn't like and didn't know. He said, "No, why would you think that?" I told him how I felt and mentioned the things above. This was before the pregnancy. He said that he was sorry that I felt that way and that he would talk to her about it. He also mentioned that she was a very shy person, so it is most likely unintentional. He's right, she is not the most outgoing person, but I can't just chalk it up to that. We've been in plenty of social settings together. I've seen how she greets and acknowledges other people, even strangers. She doesn't just lack manners or social cues because she's shy. I think it's a poor excuse. Anyway, he lets me know that they spoke, and she doesn't dislike me and didn't realize that she was being rude to me, but will make a conscious effort to be more respectful going forward. The next time that we see her, we visit her and their brother at their place. I had a terrible headache, and their brother offered the second bed in the sister's room if I wanted to lay down. They live on campus, in a house where the rooms are set up dorm style, but she does not have a roommate. Before I could say anything, she gives him a side eye and says, no. I said, "No worries," and went to lay in his room, same setup, extra bed that was my husband's while he was in college. My husband told her that wasn't cool and asked her to apologize. She did, and she said she had just done some laundry and used the extra bed to dump her clean clothes, so that was the reason for her saying no, and it was not personal. I thanked her for apologizing and was happy to move on. I asked their brother for his opinion. He's a year younger than my husband, and him and I get along very well. He basically said that she's the only girl out of 4, so the family is used to her attitude and doesn't mind. For example, she will yell at them, call them names, demand things, hang up the phone on them when they can't fulfill her needs immediately, etc. Although my siblings and I didn't grow up treating each other that way. I know some do, so if they allow it, cool. But towards me, no thank you. The next time we saw her, which was most recent, is when she came over after finding out that I was pregnant. Her and my husband were spending a day together out the house. I was too sick to leave the bed, and I couldn't help but to send a text and let him know how I felt. I told him that I should not feel that way in my own home, especially at such a vulnerable time. I don't know if any of you are familiar with HG, but it is debilitating. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. Later on that day, he asked if she could come in and apologize. In hindsight, I really wish that I would have taken them up on that offer, but in the moment, I was so overwhelmed physically, mentally, and emotionally that I told him it was not a good time for me. In the past, she has asked my husband to place Amazon orders for her because she doesn't have a Prime account. He told her that I have a Prime account, so he would relay the message. I would then place the order and text her the tracking info. I don't know if this is where her being shy comes into play, but it would be the same approach every time. She would call him directly, ask him, and he would say, "I'll ask OP. She has Prime, I do not." About a month after our last interaction, she called him to ask him to place an order. I was baffled. After knowing that I am very uncomfortable with how she treats me, she can't even send an apology text. Yet, how is she so comfortable asking me for favors? I told him exactly that, and he said he understands. He would ask her to reach out. A few more weeks pass and I get an email that reads, "Thank you for your order," from Amazon. I asked him if he placed the order on my phone, and he said, yes, she sent the money so I had to. I told him that I was not okay with him going behind my back to do something I was not comfortable with. He said that she asked him to do her a favor, not me. But really, she goes through him to avoid asking me. I told him that at this point my issue is no longer with how she treats me. I am okay with not seeing or speaking to each other moving forward. I feel like I've been begging her to be nice to me, and I'm done. My issue is now with him. He is responsible for making sure that his sister respects his wife, and he has done a poor job at that. AITA for telling my husband that if she doesn't want to respect me, that is okay, but when our baby comes, his sister will not be having a relationship with them. This may be a hot take, but I don't believe that anybody who disregards the well-being of the mother throughout her pregnancy should have access to the baby just because they're family. The other things I could let go of if she was empathic during this time. His other siblings check in on me and baby often and are very supportive and encouraging. I would have the same feelings towards any of my family members if they treated me or my husband that way. Sorry for such a long-winded post. Let me know if you have any questions that will give better context. Thank you. OP is not an AH here, rather her sister-in-law is an AH, the big one for being cold and dismissive towards OP, and now OP's demand that her sister-in-law should not have access to her newly born child is justified. She is just setting boundaries to protect the future of her child. As for scores, I would rate OP's sister-in-law 3, OP's husband 2, and OP 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now move on to the last story for this video. The story is from narrow_valuable_6330, and it revolves around the breakup of a couple during Halloween party. AITA for breaking up with my boyfriend for how he acted in a haunted house instead of supporting me during my disability. Throwaway for privacy. I, 22F, have been with my boyfriend, 24M, for 2 years. For some background, I am chronically ill and have a few issues that impact my ability to do activities that require a lot of standing and walking. I have a joint condition and a fainting condition. Typically, I use a wheelchair for outings like that. A few weeks ago, my boyfriend Mark told me that he and his friends had planned to go to a local amusement park for one of their Halloween nights, and he wanted me to come with him. There's an amusement park near our town that before they closed down for the winter, opened the park for the weekend nights as a haunted theme park. Decorations, fog machines, haunted houses, and scare actors. Something I loved doing before I got sick. While the park itself is wheelchair accessible during the main running, it isn't during their haunt nights. The haunt zones have steps, dips, tight spaces, sharp tight corners, low ceilings, and it's super dark. Not to mention a lot of it is done in fields, on gravel, or nailed together boards with cracks and gaps. And these zones are located in main areas you need to get through the park. Not something you can do in a wheelchair. Unfortunate, but not everything will be accessible. That's a fact of life. I thanked Mark for the offer but declined giving the above reasons. He told me that I could do without a wheelchair for a single night. We argued for a minute before he told me he had already bought a ticket for me and that I had to go. He didn't want to be the only one without his girlfriend there. I eventually gave up and agreed. The trip was awful. It didn't open till 8 and went till 12 a.m. and rained the entire time. I was freezing cold despite dressing in borderline winter clothes. My fingers were so cold they hurt. Mark never once offered me his extra coat. Because this was a popular holiday attraction, the lines were insane, so there was a ton of standing, something I can't handle with my fainting condition. My boyfriend refused to make his friends stop to give me breaks to sit, and he wouldn't stay back with me because he didn't want to miss out, so I had to kneel on the wet, muddy ground so I didn't pass out. Because of how uneven the ground was, transitions between concrete, gravel, grass, mud, the constant jostling and jolting made my hips, knees, and ankles hurt like hell. By the end of the night, I could barely walk. Mark wouldn't ask his friends to slow down and wouldn't hang back to walk with me, so he basically dragged me around trying to keep up with his friends. When I made any uncomfortable noises, he told me to quit trying to guilt him. On the car ride home, he told me that my constant complaining and inability to just relax and have fun ruined the vibes of the trip and made it look like we don't get along. I didn't get dropped off at home until about 1:30 in the morning. I ran a bath to soak my aching body and to seriously reconsider my relationship. Mark has never been the most accommodating of my disabilities. He started out caring and accommodating, but over time started acting like I was personally inconveniencing him. He never fully understood why I always felt so. He always urged me to leave my wheelchair at home when we went out and at one point told me that me getting a service dog made him uncomfortable. I'm on a wait list. I got out of the bath and texted him telling him it was over and gave him a few reasons why. He didn't respond until noon the next day, calling me a bitch and saying that I was being dramatic. When I told my parents and brother what happened, they said that, while I can break up with whoever I want, that doesn't change the fact that I expect too much out of people. My family thinks that I expected too much from Mark, and that I was being dramatic just because he wasn't the most helpful. AITA? Edit to add. My family is the type who believes that disabilities aren't real, and that if you're chronically ill, all you need is yoga, Jesus, and more veggies, it live a completely normal, functioning life. OP is not an AH for breaking up with her boyfriend. OP's boyfriend is an AH, a big AH for accusing her of killing the vibe, despite knowing about her disability to walk. OP's reaction is justified, and she is not overreacting here. So, for scores, I would rate OP's boyfriend 2 and OP 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. AITA for giving my ring back after my fiance made a comment to his guy friends regarding why we haven't gotten married? My fiance and I, both 30, have been together for 8 years and engaged for 4 years. We got engaged right before COVID really hit, and obviously that put a huge halt on any sort of planning. And then from there forward, life events halted it more, became homeless, ended up pregnant, and having our child. Now we are back on our feet, but not financially where we could be yet. Back roughly 5 months ago-ish, I brought up marriage and basically approached the idea of having a backyard wedding and a potluck. Basically going cheap because I don't really care so much about the wedding or price or whatever. I just want to wear a pretty dress and have all eyes on me and get married to the love of my life. I don't care about the expensive bells and whistles. When I brought it up, he told me that that wouldn't be a bad idea and that we could probably try planning for July-ish 2025. Okay, but we haven't really talked about it since that point, as other came up. Here's the issue though. Back about a month ago, we were down to our neighbor's home. People who have grown to be really good friends since we moved here 1.5 years ago. I was hanging out with the neighbor's wife and her best friend. My fiance was hanging out with a group of 3 to 4 guys, having beers and working on vehicles. Well, one of the guys there was talking about his wife and said, "Once you get married, everything stops." I overheard in the middle of the conversation, so I have no idea what stops during marriage, but it was a negative comment regardless. But anyways, my fiance then starts laughing and goes, "That's why I've been dragging my feet on marriage." And the guys just laughed and said, "Don't do it, man. It's a trap," etc., etc. It really hurt me, but I figured it was just locker room talk and tried my best to move on. But I couldn't let it go. It sat in the back of my head. So a couple weeks ago, I brought up getting married again and just ran some ideas by him on simple things, like what he saw our wedding colors being. And he shut down a bit and said something to the effect of, "I think we need to weigh the pros and cons of being married first," and shut down the conversation. Instant plunge to my gut, honestly. So I walk outside to calm myself down, but I just couldn't shake it, honestly. So I went back inside and calmly handed him my ring back and asked him what he wanted for dinner. I didn't want to make a big deal, so there was no yelling, no crying, nothing. I was calm and moved on. But he instantly asked me what I was doing and why I gave the ring back. So I mentioned his comment to his buddies about dragging his feet, and now his comments about needing to wait and weigh the pros and cons before going through with anything, and told him I don't want to wait, nor do I want to get my hopes up for a marriage that he's clearly changed his mind about. So I would rather he have the ring back and go into this without the sound of wedding bells in my head. Let's just move on basically. We can still be together. But I don't want my hopes up. Well, he got extremely defensive. Started saying, "I'm not saying it's not going to happen," or "You're being extreme for no reason." AITA? OP is certainly not an AH. Rather, her boyfriend is an AH for continuously postponing the marriage just because he thinks everything stops after marriage. It is a red flag. OP did the right thing by returning the engagement ring. As for scores, I would rate OP 0 out of 5 on the AH scale, and OP's fiance is a big AH, so I would rate him 2.5 on the AH scale. Let's now jump on to the next story from Routine-Plant 7691. My husband is having a baby with his affair partner. I want him to choose between me and the baby. AITA? 2 months ago, my husband of 15 years confessed to me that he had been having a year-long affair with a woman he met through a friend. My world was rocked to its core, but he was remorseful and filled with shame over it. After a week of contemplation on my part and begging on his part, I agreed to reconcile. He went no contact with his affair partner immediately and blocked her everywhere. Reconciliation has been rocky and challenging, and even though he had been doing his best, I was struggling to come to terms with his betrayal. Last week, his affair partner emailed him, through a new account she created because he had blocked her original account, to inform him that she was pregnant with his child. He showed me the email and told me he needed to contact her to find out if any of it was true, or if she was just doing this to get him to talk to her. When he unblocked her phone number, she sent him screenshots of her blood work results, indicating she was indeed pregnant, as well as a picture of her sonogram. I was shattered, of course. It felt like a whole new act of betrayal, and I kicked him out of the house. My husband and I wanted children, and couldn't have them. We tried everything from medications to IVF, but nothing took. So, to learn that he got his affair partner pregnant was yet another blow. She told him she didn't want to keep the baby if he wasn't going to be in the child's life. He admitted to me that he doesn't want her to let go of the baby, as it could be his only chance to be a father. I've expressed that I am willing to continue with the reconciliation process with him, but I am in no way going to accept helping him co-parent his child with this woman, because it would mean having this woman in my life forever, and that would be torturous. He thinks it is unfair of me to be putting him in a position to choose between me and his baby. AITA? Edit 1. Skimming through the comments here. To address a few points, as hurtful as it was to learn about his betrayal, yes, I believed that with putting in the work, we could save what we had, as he was truly remorseful, and still is. However, some of the comments did ring true for me. Had he chosen me and our marriage, he would not even entertain the thought of having this child with her, and in no way, shape, or form would I ever consider co-parenting his bastard child. I don't understand the many comments suggesting he needs to do right by his child. I know this is a controversial topic for many, but this is a fetus, in my opinion, and not a child. It has not yet come to live, and to be quite honest, what happens to it is not my concern. The fact of the matter is, he is considering having a child with this woman, placing his selfish needs to be a father above me, the woman he took vows with and promised in sickness and in health until death do us part. So, for that reason alone, I won't be leaving it up to him to choose. I will make sure he knows I am no longer an option in this scenario, and will be proceeding with separation and divorce. Edit 2. Am I in the twilight zone? I get cheated on. I forgive him. I find out he fathered a baby with his affair partner. I say, I can work on it as long as she terminates, and he does not choose to become a father to her fetus. And now I'm the devil incarnate? Yes, it is a fetus right now. If his affair partner has the child, and it is born, and it exists in the real world, then yes, he should step up and be in its life. And in that case, I would no longer want to be in the picture. But as of right now, it is not here. What am I missing? Edit 3. This will be my last edit. I am emotionally and mentally exhausted. I won't be reading or responding to any more comments. Thanks to those who have shared kind words of empathy with me. OP is not the AH for setting boundaries after her husband's betrayal. It's understandable that she feels hurt, especially given her infertility struggles, and she has the right to choose not to co-parent a child from the affair. While it may seem harsh to expect her husband to abandon the baby, her emotions are valid. Ultimately, OP is making a difficult but necessary choice for her own well-being and peace of mind. Basically, it is not about the parenting a child, but it is about betrayal. So, OP is not an AH, and I would rate her 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now jump on the next story from Firakti. AITA for exposing my sister's affair. Right before her wedding and uncovering a family secret? I, 27F, have always lived in my older sister Anna's, 28F shadow. She's the golden child, brilliant, popular, and adored by our parents. I've always been the wild one, who can never do anything right in their eyes. Anna has been engaged to Jake, 30M, for over a year. He's a genuinely great guy who treats her well, and he's even become a friend to me. But about 6 months ago, during a family gathering, Anna got a little too drunk and confided in me that she was cheating on Jake with her high school ex. She insisted it was just a temporary fling, before settling down and begged me to keep it a secret. I felt conflicted, but figured it wasn't my place to interfere. Last week, Jake came to me, glowing about how lucky he felt to be marrying someone as trustworthy as Anna. It broke my heart to see him so blissfully unaware, so I finally decided I couldn't keep quiet any longer. I told him everything. When Jake confronted Anna, she denied everything and accused me of lying out of jealousy. Heartbroken and confused, he went to our parents for support. That's when things really unraveled. My parents defended Anna and revealed that they had covered for her before. A while back, she had a brief affair with a married professor during her last year of college. When the affair came to light, my parents helped her transfer to another university to escape the fallout. They convinced her to break things off quietly, promising that no one would find out about it. Now, faced with this history of cover-ups, Jake was understandably devastated. Not just by Anna's infidelity, but also by my parents' willingness to hide the truth from him. He called off the wedding, feeling betrayed by both Anna and my parents. Since then, my family has turned against me completely. They're furious, accusing me of ruining Anna's life and destroying the family reputation again. My parents have cut off communication and told me I'm jealous of Anna's success. Some relatives have even contacted me, calling me selfish for interfering in Anna's life. To make things even more complicated, Jake reached out again, asking if he should contact Anna's high school ex to get his side of the story. I'm torn between wanting him to know the truth and fearing it will just create more chaos. So, AITA for exposing Anna's affair and revealing my family's history of covering up scandals, even if it means losing my family? OP is not the AH for choosing honesty over protecting her sister's deception, preventing Jake from entering a marriage built on lies. While exposing the truth caused family fallout, OP isn't responsible for their toxic cover-ups. As for scores, I would rate OP 0 out of 5 and OP's sister 3.5 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now jump on to the next story from My Mom is a Zealot. AITA for telling my mother that very few people attended her recent party because she has become an insufferable political fanatic. I'm not going to state the candidate's name because people may claim the post is political rage bait when it isn't. To put it mildly, my mother has become a douche since endorsing this candidate. She's been on Facebook, arguing and attacking friends, some now former, and family members who disagree with her, and proudly displaying endorsement signs in her yard. Her intensity has only grown as election season closes in. Family gatherings have become tense, as many people no longer feel comfortable around her. Nervous she'll launch into a political rant unprovoked. My mother has a decent-sized home and yard that can comfortably host its fair share. Her parties are usually good turnouts, but at her recent birthday party, fewer people showed up than she anticipated. She overpurchased food, supplies, and alcohol, and has been complaining about the expenses ever since, and complaining about feeling unloved. I finally had enough of the self-pity, and told her I wasn't surprised by the turnout. People didn't show up because she prioritizes her love for this candidate over actual people in her personal life, and it's become exhausting to experience for everyone. She thought I was being dramatic. I told her that 3 people literally texted me to ask if she'd be talking about the candidate at the party, and said they wouldn't come if so. The saddest part was that I honestly couldn't confirm that she would keep the peace. There's no holding her back. She won't maintain harmony by simply avoiding the topic, even though she's been asked to on multiple occasions. She got annoyed and insisted that people can agree to disagree on politics, and that it's perfectly fine to have differing views with loved ones. In the end, you should still be able to come together. I told her that's not really the case. People can remain cool if they disagree on trivial things like pizza toppings, but not on something this significant, especially when you go attacking them online. She claims her online arguments are just healthy debates. I added that her behavior has been both embarrassing and anxiety-inducing when she turns enjoyable gatherings into political battlegrounds. Now she thinks I'm the asshole for thinking people are justified in turning their backs on her over politics, and that I conspired against her. She believes that by telling her 3 people texted me about potentially not coming, I knew in advance that so many people wouldn't show up and should have warned her. OP is not an AH for giving honest feedback about her mom's behavior and political extremism, which was driving people away from them. OP did what a benevolent person is expected to do. So, OP is not an AH, and I would give her 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. However, OP Moms is an AH, and I would rate her 2.5 on the AH scale. Let's now jump on to the next story from throwraw_stadhusband8. AITA for going no contact with my sister after finding out she had a hand in a traumatic childhood event. Candace, 34F, had a pretty rough childhood. My 3 sisters, Della, 33F, Mary, 32F, and Alice, 31F, and I were raised by my stepdad. He was the youngest two's real dad. He was a good dad in some ways, but there was a lot of physical abuse under the guise of discipline, along with being exposed to unsavory people. When I was around 11 or 12, my youngest sister, Alice, brought a letter to my dad that was apparently written by someone named Candace. It was to a boy named Dustin, and the letter basically said, "I don't like it when you try to touch me inappropriately. Please stop. Sincerely, Candace." My dad called me in and said that I had written the letter, even though that wasn't how I spelled my name, and the handwriting was different from mine. I tried to explain that it wasn't me, but he wasn't hearing it. He made me tape the letter on the wall of his bedroom, and he beat me every day, morning and night, for 3 days, making me write the date and time of each beating on the letter. The only reason he stopped is because the last day he beat me, his friend came by while he was beating me and told him he should let it go. This has been a memory that I've always struggled with. Getting beaten was bad enough, but those beatings were some of the worst I'd ever experienced, and I didn't even do anything wrong. I have been bitter about it my whole life. I had my first child when I was 20 while my husband was deployed, and I lived with my dad while my husband was gone. I confronted my dad about the beatings, saying that it was messed up that he beat me like that over something I didn't do. He got mad and said how I dare question how he parented me. I packed up my stuff that night, and the next morning my baby and I left to another state to go live with my husband's family. I never saw or spoke to my dad again, and he died the next year. I was sad that we never spoke again, but I was still bitter about those beatings. Every time I told the story, whether to a friend or my partner, I would almost come to tears, still angry about it. Fast forward to the other day, I was talking to my second youngest sister, Mary, on the phone. She has had mental health problems for years. We were discussing beatings we had gotten from our dad as kids, and I brought up the letter beating. She then told me, laughing, that it was her that had written the letter all those years ago, and she thought I knew. I was in shock. I told her I needed to hang up to process what she had revealed to me, but she kept laughing like it was no big deal. I was devastated. While I went through all kinds of physical, emotional, and sexual abuse as a child, those beatings were some of my worst memories. I couldn't believe she watched me basically get tortured for 3 days and never said anything to stop it. I hung up and called my sister Della, who was shocked to hear that Mary had done that all those years ago. She told me I should go no contact for a while to recover emotionally. So I did just that. Now my other sister and mom are blowing up my phone, calling me an AH for cutting my sister off for something she did at 9 years old. They say she was just a little kid and didn't know any better. So, am I the AH? Edit. My mother wasn't around. She ran off when we were little, which is why we were raised by my stepdad. She came back around when we were older. My relationship with my siblings is normally okay. Ironically, I always had a worse relationship with Della than Mary and Alice, at least until the last 5 years. Alice is extremely religious and is always preaching about forgiveness, which is why she's trying to convince me to let it go. My mom just tries to keep the peace. Plus, Mary lives with her and has mental health problems, so my mom just tries to keep her calm and happy. Della and I went through the worst things growing up, so we've bonded over that. She alone understands how much I went through as a kid. Thanks for all the comments. I didn't know if I was making too big of a deal about it. I've been in therapy for years. Along with my childhood trauma, I'm also a firefighter and have seen some pretty bad stuff. So therapy is a bi-weekly occurrence for me. I will definitely be NC with most of my family for a while. Update. I'm pretty shocked this post went as viral as it did, and I tried my best to speak to my wife yesterday. I just can't believe that this is the woman I married. I tried speaking with her, telling her that what she did wasn't that big of a deal, but was still not a nice thing to do. She didn't like me bringing it up again, and just told me to suck it up and stop about one mistake. She apologized, but in a tone that just sounded like she was just tired of dealing with this. I noticed her getting very heated and on the verge of starting an argument, so I backed off and switched to a different topic. I asked if we could adjust our duties at home to be fairer for both of us, since most of our management fell to me. I mean, pretty much 90% of things like cooking, cleaning, including planning for our date nights or vacations for our family, rely on me. I do think it's an issue that she gets to come home and just tell me that she's tired. Then she got up in my face, telling me I had no right to lecture her about chore duties when I'm practically at home most of the time. She completely refused to hear me out and basically told me that what we have works best for our situation. She threw me in my face that she was the moneymaker and that balanced everything out in the end. Even this morning, she was pretty annoyed with me, coming downstairs in a bad mood. I'm very sure our kids noticed it too, but I drove them to school after they got ready. When I got back, I noticed that my wife left her packed lunch on our kitchen counter. So now I'm sitting here, just feeling like the woman I've known for 15 years hates me. I guess I'll have to push this issue properly even if she gets angry. She's been ignoring my texts and attempts to call her. I can't just let her act like this, especially in front of our children. Update 2. I think I'm just done at this point. I did something I never did before and went into her phone while she slept. We both know each other's passwords, so it wasn't really difficult. Some of the cheating comments got to me, and I felt pretty paranoid about this situation. Instead, I found a group chat with some of her work friends, different from the other friends she had over. It was just non-stop mockery of me and some of the stuff I did for her. She told them how embarrassed she feels to be with me and that I dote on her like a parent and don't feel like her husband. The lunches I pack for her are humiliating because I add sweets and other treats I know she likes. Some of her coworkers teased her about the snacks I have in for her, and she admitted to just throwing them out at work. She doesn't have any issue eating them at home, but at work, she throws out my baking. She had some choice words to say about me in her chat, some of which I don't have the courage to type out here. One of her meme pictures was of me on my knees, scrubbing a bathroom tile, edited to have some sort of dress on like I was some sort of housewife from the 1960s or something. I just closed her phone and left the bedroom. I confronted her about the chat in the morning and the contents of it, which got her panicking. I focused on our kids this morning and left her to her own devices. It's not like she would have appreciated a kid's lunch anyways. Now she's texting me like crazy at the office, but I think I lost all respect for her and what she's become. Not only does she find me overbearing and embarrassing as a husband, but then I find out she mocks me to her friends and exposes some sensitive relationship issues to her group chat. This will probably be the last update since I don't think she can come back from this. We'd just celebrated our 15th anniversary last month too. I feel like a loser now after seeing what my wife actually thinks of me. OP is certainly not an AH for going no contact with her sister after discovering that her sister knowingly caused a deeply traumatic event. No matter that Mary was only 9 at the time of the event, her laughing at the revelation shows a lack of remorse, which is enough to justify OP's response. OP's sister is an AH, and I would give her 2.5 out of 5 on the AH scale. As for OP, she gets 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now jump onto the next story from Oayao 1. AITA for letting my roommates think we were evicted so I could live alone again. Long post ahead. But to preface, I 21M have lived in this city for 4 years. The first 2 being W a cousin 25F. The third year we moved on our own, and due to family troubles my cousin's cousin, we will call her Hadley, also 25F, moved away from home and to this city with our mutual cousin. After living together for 2 years, Hadley moved a man 30M from another state in W them that she knew over FaceTime for a couple months. Our mutual cousin, the one I lived with, decided to move out on her own again. During the 2 years that Hadley was down here, we became close, got jobs together, and decided to go back to school together. We were planning on going into the nursing program together, which is why when our mutual cousin moved out, Hadley suggested that we move in together so that we don't have to pay full rent while trying to put ourselves through school. So, I move in. First week is great. We are all ha ha he he, and everything seems like it's gonna be chill. Then I had a trip to Colorado, where I sustained a brown recluse spider bite on my hand. which left me basically one-handed as I was in so much pain. When I returned, they were aware of the bite, and that I wouldn't be able to clean up the kitchen really, and was ordering takeout for a while since I couldn't cook my own meals. I'm a chef BTW. They refused to clean up after themselves, even though I wasn't really using the kitchen. And the groceries that I did have, they got into, even after multiple times of setting that boundary. So I just ate mainly takeout because I'm not buying groceries for a household of 3 very capable adults, LMAO. They started moving weird, like going to our hometown to visit family and not even telling me they would be gone, eating more of my groceries, and even straight up, walking past and ignoring me. Okay, they're way out the door. So, at this point, I am looking for a new place because I'm not dealing with this anymore. So, last week of the month, and I receive a message from the front office asking why rent hasn't been paid. Since Hadley and her BF were on the lease, first they had all the login and portal info, so I wasn't even aware that rent wasn't paid. I started tripping because why when you asked for $450 I sent it, I immediately without question, and now I'm being asked why rent isn't paid. I'm dumbfounded, angry, and losing my mind. I start messaging, calling, and even knocking on their bedroom door with no responses to anything. After me blowing their phones up, I received a message hours later from Hadley saying that they already talked to the office and they're aware of everything and that we were asleep, but pop-off saying I was overreacting basically. But okay, if they already spoke to the office, I'm assuming everything is handled. So imagine my surprise the following Monday when we are served an eviction notice. I went to the office immediately and let them know the situation. They escalated my claim up to the owners who live in a different state, and they said they would work with me so that I was able to stay in the apartment. I just needed to come up with the full month's rent in 72 hours, or they'll be forced to push the eviction through. I have perfect rental history, and I'm not letting two grown ruin my life for the next 7 years or so. It takes to get a decent lease in your name after an eviction. Pop off? So bet I will, LMAO. Advice from the office was to pretend that I was packing my things and let them think we were all evicted so they could vacate the property, and I will switch the lease into my name after they're gone. The day before our 72 hours were up, they had the audacity to ask if there was any way I was able to pay the full month's rent. Where TF did the money go that I gave you? So that they didn't have to make plans to move. In that moment, I was filled with so much rage that they were just so comfortable ruining all of our lives because get this. They have both been unemployed since the beginning of the month, and our communication was lacking so severely that they didn't even mention it the times we did talk. So I told them, we are and it's your fault. Your lack of communication has landed us here, and I am not in the position to dig us out. So I followed the advice from the office. They moved out and back to our hometown, probably derailing her schooling, and I now have a 2-bed, 2-bath apartment all to myself that I didn't even want in the first place. But AITA for letting my roommates think we were evicted so that I could live alone again? Not feeling remorseful, just want outside opinions, LOL. OP is not an AH for securing his interests. Rather, OP's roommate is an AH for showing an irresponsible behavior, especially regarding unpaid rent and refusal to cleaning. What OP did is 100% justified, so I would rate OP 0 out of 5 on the AH scale, and OP's roommate deserves at least 2.5 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now move on to the next story from Visible-Broccoli-381. AITA for breaking up with my fiance for telling her best friend she was not engaged. My now ex-fiance, 30F, and I, M27, got engaged 3 weeks ago. We've been dating for 5 years, and I finally got the money to give her the wedding she wanted. Well, 3 days ago, we were discussing our guest list, and I asked if she wanted to invite her best friend. Let's call him James, M30. James lives in another state. But since they were friends for 10 years, I thought I could even pay for his travel expenses since it would be great to have her best friend at the wedding. She denied, saying that it would take a lot of work to bring him, and she wanted it to be a family event. Countless times she mentioned that James was like family to her, so I insisted. She got annoyed and said, I didn't even tell him we were engaged. That took me by surprise. I tried to ask why, but she started stonewalling me, and I left her alone. After a couple of hours, I tried to ask her again why she hadn't told him we were engaged, and she still refused to tell me. I admit my insecurity got the better of me. In the past, James had confessed he had feelings for her, which she turned down and basically friend-zoned him. But by the way she told me, it always sounded like she had him as a backup. Something not only me, but her exes realized. She married him online. They always made their WoW characters look like a couple, like wearing the same transmog and stuff like that. When she had a fight with her exes, he was always there for her, and so on. I told her that made me uncomfortable, and if she was not planning to tell him, she might as well consider herself single, because I would not marry someone who couldn't be honest. Yes, I was pretty immature, but she did something even more immature. She texted him while showing me her phone something like, "Hey, just so you know, I was engaged but not anymore," and sent it to him. I told her to pack her things and leave my house. Ever since she left, she has been calling me, but I refused to answer. My mom called me, because she apparently called my mom, and said that I was an for ending things for such a ridiculous thing. AITA, edit. Hey guys, I made some dinner, and I think I'm gonna go with you/done over69 position. Cool username BTW. I'm gonna ask her to meet up and ask to see their messages. I'm already low contact with my mom, but I'm going to make my decisions after I clear everything up. So I'm kind of promising an update. Update, AITA for breaking up with my fiance for telling her best friend she was not engaged. Hey guys, it's been a couple of days since I used this account to tell my story, and some things happened. But this is a positive update. First, I want to say thank you to everyone who reached out in my DMs and commented saying nice things. It felt really good, and I appreciate you all. Some of you actually made me tear up with your kind messages. Second, I saw my 2 previous posts were in a YT video of a guy who reads Reddit posts, and my update was on Reddit, and that caught me off guard. But I want to express my gratitude for everyone who gave me advice, told their own story, or just told me I was a cool guy. Reading your messages before writing this felt amazing. I also want to say I thought about my engagement a lot, and I have no regrets whatsoever. Yeah, things ended badly, and she was not a good person to me at the end. But I just don't hate her, nor do I wish for her to fail. We had good moments. I felt happy with her. And again, I really thought she was the one. Feeling hatred was going to harm me more than her. To the update, her mom came to pick up her stuff, and we talked for hours. It felt like therapy. I cried on her shoulders. We laughed. She expressed how much I meant to her family, and that I would always be welcome in her home. It felt so good to hear her say those things to me. Before she left, she asked me if I wanted to ask about my ex. I got curious and asked how she was doing. Her words were, "She's trying to act stoic, but I know my daughter, she's not taking this well." I left it at that. She gave me a hug and left. About the car, I'm going to donate it and get a tax write-off. But the thing I'm excited about is that I'm going to the Royal Rumble. I never even watched Raw or SmackDown live, but now that I have the extra cash, I'm going to treat myself. Again, thank you all for reaching out. Sorry to the people who love drama, that this update doesn't have an unwanted pregnancy, a fight, chaos, or a plot twist. The truth is that my life is just really boring. Be kind, people. OP is not the age for breaking up with his fiance. Her decision to not inform her best friend, a male best friend, about the engagement raises valid concerns about trust and transparency. Later on, she showed a very immature behavior. So, she is an AH, and I would give 3.5 out of 5 on the AH scale, and OP gets nothing. Hello all. My nieces and nephews have decided I, as the cool auntie, must master this thing called Reddit with stories of my youth. I hope you all enjoy seeing the story written out as much as they've enjoyed hearing it over the years. To start this story, I need to explain a bit about where it happened. My grandfather owned a 150-acre plus forest campground property, with over a dozen buildings on the property. These buildings ranged from the common rooms, ceremony hall, barn, 18 different cabins, and a few other buildings one might find on a beautiful campground. This was used as a venue for all sorts of company retreats, wedding events, camps, or getaway. Anytime a camp was run that was used horses, my grandpa enlisted the help of the grandkids. He had gotten his fill of screaming and shouting kids, or excitedly shrieking women, or men who thought they knew best when it came to horses by the time I came along. One event happened when I was about 11 years old. I was helping out with the Girl Scouts guided tour on one of the trail rides, when I noticed the smell was wrong in the air. I had us all turn back while the den mother tried to harp on about how I was cutting their trail short. I lied and said one of the horses had a bad limp and we needed to turn back right away. All of the girls were worried about the horse in question, and the rider offered to walk next to her horse all the way back. I said he'd be okay, but we needed to turn back now. Well, when we made it out of the thick forest trail, where the trees weren't blocking us in, we could see what made me and the horses so uneasy. Smoke. Loads of smoke was coming up the mountain. The worst place for a fire to be is under you on the mountain. I knew the property. I'd grown up riding and climbing all over it. I ordered everyone to give their horse their head and let them bolt back to the barn. The barn had a large open arena that was just plain dirt. It would last until we could get them down to the fire station. I let everyone ride hard past me. These girls were barely clinging to their horses, and I was worried that someone might fall off if I was completely honest. Well, we made it back to the arena without any real issues. A lot of the girls were crying. One of my older brothers assured us that everything was all right and told the girls they would be earning a few extra badges today. They'd sign off on them and everything, which got the girls to brighten up a lot. Now, the fire hadn't spread too far onto Grandpa's property just yet. I knew of the large water tanks, had to join in cleaning them before, but I never understood how exceptional the water tanks really were. That day, I got to see my grandpa's water storage almost choke an entire forest fire. The 5 small tanks, 30,000 gallons, were accessed at key spots with the fire department. The 3 medium tanks, 65,000 gallons, were put onto a sprinkler system that absolutely soaked everything on the property, turning it to a thick mud. Even the gravel and cement pathways were covered in mud. However, the 2 large tanks, 120,000 gallons, were being used with the firefighting helicopters. To a child, it felt like you were in the middle of the war zone. I was scared as I tried to keep the Girl Scouts and the horses calm when the firecopters flew overhead to refill at the main large one. By the end of it, the fire was out. The Girl Scouts got 5 badges ranging from fire safety to leadership, and everyone was safe. The cleanup for the fire took 2 weeks, a lot of pressure washing, and a lot of back-breaking labor. Now, on to the main reason I'm here, to tell the story of petty revenge. On Grandpa's property, there were beautiful trails, a gorgeous vista that had almost no light pollution, and plenty of reasons to hike, explore, and book us for events. Grandpa was protective of these venue spots because if he allowed people to walk freely, people wouldn't pay for the use of them, so he made sure to follow the letter of the law, marking it as private property, and would chase people down if they violated it. One person in town hounded Grandpa for use of the property for free because Grandma attended the church. She demanded Grandpa give them free use of the property for every book study, every little event. However, she wanted to charge an admission that would go right back into the church that her husband was one of the pastors too. To say Grandpa did not enjoy this money, grubbing woman, was an understatement. He wasn't a churchgoer, but to keep the peace with his wife's church, he would host free events once a year or so for this church's youth. A free event to come up, be fed for a 3-day weekend, interact with the horses, go on trail ride, and go fishing in the river or in the big pond on the property. He would host 3 a year for the children in the valley, depending on their age. He would also enlist his kids and grandkids to help out with the events to save on costs of running them. Well, after doing this for 5 years, it came out when I went to the church that she had been charging families almost $300 for the sake of going to the church. I had gone with my oldest brother, who they assumed was my dad, and tried to sell him on the event. My brother's face went red, and he asked for further confirmation on the dates and the event itself. He agreed to think about it, and the woman went on to badger another family. They offered sponsorships that allowed the kids to go up for a discount too. She was squeezing every last penny out of her fellow churchgoers. My brother and I had been there to talk to the head pastor, not this woman's husband, about him visiting our grandmother since she was bedridden due to her old age. Mid-sermon though, my brother stood up after whispering to another woman to ask if the one hosting the service was the husband to that woman or not. When she had confirmed that he was, my brother stood up. This was not our church. No one here knew us. My brother had a voice that could fill up a space while talking at a normal tone, so when I heard him suddenly speaking after standing, I was surprised myself. You can imagine the look on over 200 people's faces as a stranger stood up and interrupted a sermon. Brother, I'm surprised you're able to stand up on that stage and speak of honesty to these people. You and your wife are crooks and thieves. You've been stealing from them for who knows how many events. I'm curious how far down the rabbit hole your theft goes. Pastor, excuse me, sir. What are you talking about? Brother, my grandfather runs the horse camp all the kids are attending this coming weekend. He's never charged any of the kids or their families a cent for using it. He knows how hard it is to attend fancy camps. He had to pay for all of his kids. He hated having to come up with so much money all the time. He hosts a free event for the kids. His grandkids help him run the event. I should know, I'm the stable master during the event. You could have heard a pin drop. The pastor's face turned a few shades of red, and then a woman stood up a few rows back from us. Woman, what do you mean? He doesn't charge. This woman looked ready to breathe fire, and I noticed this woman had 5 children with her. She looked ready to start a riot, as my brother nodded. Brother, my granddad knew firsthand how hard it was to come up with funds and how much going to different places affected his kids and helped them grow. He pays for their food. He lets them use the horses, has his family teach them about horses, and hey Daniel, remember me? One of the older kids had been staring at my brother from this woman as he confirmed that my brother worked at the event. Everything broke out into screaming and shouting at that point, and it took us hours to sort everything out. The pastor's wife had gone missing during this screaming match. It came to light the pastor thought his wife, who headed the organization, would give all the funds off to my grandpa. She never put them into the church even. Things got a little crazy as everyone realized she was gone, and the weight of the scam she'd pulled off on them. Each event hosted around 20 to 25 children. People would donate money to help get the kids of families with less funds there too. So we're not sure how much under the table money was given for that goal, but we do have an estimate on how much she got away with. $105,000 was the estimated she got away with before vanishing into the night. To say it was confusing was an understatement for me. I just wanted to go back home and keep an eye on the horses. My oldest brother's fury was nothing compared to anger my grandpa felt. He was so angry about all of it, and only allowed the head pastor to come up and visit his wife, no one else. He was bitter, but at his wife's request, he wouldn't let his bitterness affect the kids. We hosted the events as planned, and Grandpa's bitterness grew as we went from having 25 as our max to almost 50 per session. Every bed was filled in the camp beds, every bunk stuffed, and all of our hearts felt raw. I was a kid, and I felt cheated, but I refused to let that show trying to follow Grandpa's example. I failed miserably a few times, I'm sure of that, but I did try. Well, now we're onto the revenge part of the story. All of the above happened in the lovely era of internet is a thing. How new. Grandpa had his venue listed in the yellow pages if that dates us at all. I had turned 20. And Grandma's health, which had been in steady decline over the past few years, had really crashed hard. Her end was getting close. Grandpa asked me to help with her and the events going on because he was in no way ready to visit with people at all. So I balanced taking care of her needs and Grandpa's needs with running the venue through the booked events. On the website we had, I removed all the information and wrote a message that stated, "Due to current conditions, only previously booked events are on the schedule. Thank you. We'll be up and running again after the events conclude." It was the nicest way I could think to put, "My grandparents aren't able to handle people at the moment. Please leave us all alone." Well, while in with the pastor in town, after tending to things for almost 5 months, my truck broke down. Unfortunately for me, the auto shop needed a part from another city, and it would take a few days to get there. I asked a family member if he could tow me to the shop over there, and he offered to have his wife drop off their car so I could get back to work with Grandma, and he'd take care of my truck. I politely refused. I desperately needed a break. Even just a ride to another town 30 minutes away would get me away from the suffocating feeling with them. They agreed and took me over to get my truck fixed. Now the shop owner said it would be about 3 hours to fix it, and I could wander around town. I told my family member I was good. He could head out and I'd call if I needed more help. He gave me a hug and told the auto shop he'd pay for the repair. I needed a break and I appreciated that. Family helps family is our family creed. So I got to wander around a town I never really got to, trying to find a good place to get some food for lunch. When I made it to a restaurant, I noticed a very well-made flyer in a window. It talked about an upcoming meteor shower and how beautiful it was going to be. It reminded one about how the next town over's light pollution was going to eclipse the beauty of God's sparkling show. It talked about an event being held up on the mountain, where parking would be $20 for a breathtaking view of the sky, weather permitting. I smiled a little as I read the flyer and then did a double take. The flyer was boasting about a certain vista, a vista only available on Grandpa's land. I wrote down all the info on the flyer and told myself I would call as soon as possible. I went into the shop to get food and wondered if I'd messed up and completely forgotten an event or not. Well, turned out I hadn't when I got home and double-checked everything. We had parking for maybe 40 cars max, so I was curious where the cars would be parked. I decided to call with an out-of-state cell phone, thanks to an uncle and aunt who were visiting Grandma when I got back with my truck. Host, hi, how can I help you? Me, hi, I found your flyer. Oh my gosh, it sounds like so much fun. I mean, the stars in town are like 1000% better than anything in my area. Are they really so pretty up on the mountain? Host, oh yes. It's one of the best places to watch the stars in our area. It's going to be absolutely beautiful. Me, but I'm worried about how many people are going to be going. Parking us. My car's not going to I don't know, end up with dirt on it, is it? Host, oh, no worries about that. We have premium parking for $40, but the $20 is parking in a pasture. Me, the entrance fee is by car. Do we need another type of fee? Host, oh yes. A $5 fee per person will also be needed. Make sure to bring cash for parking and your entrance fees. We'll have food carts too. I was shaking at this point in anger at this woman. I had checked the schedule, and I knew no event was going to be happening. The campground had been abandoned a bit. All of the horses moved to my cousin's place at the base of the mountain, and I was taking care of Grandma and Grandpa at their cabin on another property on the same mountain, closer to the hospital and all. Me. All right, I'll be there. Thanks so much. I hung up after the goodbyes and started to shake in anger. I knew the property was closed down, and we'd had issues with someone breaking into the property. I had been trying my best to manage the events, the venue, and Grandma and Grandpa. She had mentioned that a pasture would be parking for everyone, and I wondered which one it would be. Then I realized it was time for the soil to be tilled and smoothed for the horses. I also realized something that I could do that would be wonderfully evil. I asked my visiting family if they wouldn't mind keeping an eye on Grandma and Grandpa, and I sped off to visit a family member. This particular man had married one of Grandma and Grandpa's daughters and adored the family and worked as part of the fire department for our area. I came in with all the information I had and told him my plan. I signed the documents and he put the information away at the back of a drawer and gave me the okay to go with my plan. I tilled the pastures, all of them. I churned up the dirt and then smoothed it out, making it look like such an inviting slab of land to park on. I then left all of the gates wide open. I didn't want anyone breaking locks, and I knew this was going to happen one way or another. Now, if you've ever tilled the soil, you know the ground is soft. That's what plants need in order to grow. Hard soil will kill your plants almost as fast as overwatering or crows. The day before the event, I was in the main parlor getting some water when I noticed a car coming up. They sped up, and who stepped out but the pastor's wife I'd seen all those years ago, and another woman from the same church. It dawned on me then that this was a con they were using, and I wondered how many times they'd used the campgrounds before. I saw red. I hid and watched as they knocked on doors, checked all over the place for any signs of life, and then started to talk excitedly as they sped off. I made sure my grandparents were well looked after as I kept lurking in the campgrounds and waiting. They came back the next day, the day of the event, and brought a line of porta pots, a hand-washing station, and a few food vendors that got set up. They turned on the footlights to the wedding vista, and I felt my blood just about boil. I could have called the cops then for trespass, but I had a much bigger plan in my mind for these nasty women. I waited. I waited until I saw cars lining the pastures, 3 pastures worth of cars, the driveway crammed so tight with cars that I was amazed at how many fit. The gravel drive was even being used, and so was the cement area by the barn. I hadn't realized how big asterisk this event was really going to be, and instantly started to worry about my plan. There were so many people, but I had followed the letter of the law with help from my family. I had posted the private property and the closed for maintenance signs up all over the place. I was so nervous as I saw so many people going up the path, but resolved that my plan was foolproof. When the food vendors turned off their lights, I knew it was time. Everyone was blocked in and up at the vista. I started with the pastures. That lovely soil plus the sprinkler system quickly became a muddy sinkhole that stuck all the cars up to the tires or doors. I went all out. I turned on every fire sprinkler on the property. I knew the vista was getting a proper soaking too. Everything was. I had started with the pastures first, and with sprinklers that could douse a fire, it did everything I remembered as a child. It flooded the pastures, it made the driveways impassable, it washed out part of the road for anything other than off-roaring trucks or vehicles. With over 100 cars in the pastures, I was gleeful as I heard people coming down the path. I shut off the sprinklers after 10 minutes, while everyone tried to figure out what was going on. People were calling the police, emergency services, screaming and confusion everywhere. The 2 women's car I had taken great delight in letting the air out of the tires and adding extra water under. The car was sunk pretty deep. Well, my work was done. I hiked out and down the hill and left to go back into town. The police made it up by the time I'd already gotten back to Grandma and Grandpa's place. I was found there and family vouched that I had been there the entire night when the police showed up. I explained to the police I wouldn't be caught up on the campground tonight, especially not with a fire safety test going on. We were to test the water tank's pressure by running them on an automatic timer for 10 minutes and then measuring the water missing from the tanks in a few days when things settled and were passable. They wanted to know about the event, and we said we weren't hosting any events at all. Why would we? When we told the police department almost a month prior, the campground was closed until further notice. The two women who had hosted the event were caught and charged with trespass and a whole mess of other things, including reckless endangerment. The firemen produced the permit too, to test the fire tanks. After all, they were paramount to the running of the fire department. They had 2 helicopters that would fill at those stations after all, and they needed to make sure that each pump could push out 100 gallons per minute after all. The women had to pay for tow services, damage the towing caused to the property, hotels and inns for the people who were stranded, and didn't have someone else to come pick them up and a ton of legal fees. The woman from the church had been wanted for her previous crimes and had been living at this woman's house, helping her to run similar scams all over the country by using out-of-season abandoned properties for their scams. I don't have too much information on the end of it all, because unfortunately at the time it was wrapping up, Grandma passed away. I do know that all profits from the scams had been sunk into fixing the damages and repaying for the crimes. It cost a lot to dig out the cars that got stuck in the mud. I hope you all enjoyed my tale of revenge. I did not expect it to be so long to write up, but then when I tell the story to family and friends, they all know the campgrounds, so I don't have to go into that. The revenge was really satisfying and was executed masterfully. OP's clear planning revealed the true nature of the scammer poster and his wife, who were making fools of people. The OP and her brother left the duo ashamed and red-faced. It was really cool to see the exposure of the posters who were making money in the name of the church. I would just say the revenge was really cool, satisfying and whatnot. Let's not move on to the next story from Mang_Bang. 5,489. Neighbors refused to be quiet, so I played the long game and made them move out. A few years ago, I got hired at a job in a big city with expensive rent. I slept on my brother's couch for a few months while I struggled to find a place, but eventually found someone in an old building who wanted to get out of their rental agreement. The apartment was pretty close to work and in a nice area, so I took it, almost too good to be true. It didn't take long for me to realize I made a big mistake. The building was old, and the walls were made of plaster. Any sound reverberated like crazy. I could hear people cough and sneeze like they were standing in my place. What's worse, I shared one of these thin walls with my neighbors, who were absolutely insane. They just would not shut up. I would hear a man and woman argue constantly, often until 2 or 3 in the morning. And by arguing, I mean literally screaming and shouting and throwing things against the wall. When they weren't arguing, they were always just loud, shouting and whining at each other like little kids constantly. Pretty much the quintessential toxic, obnoxious couple. And the shit they would argue about was so stupid. I remember hearing an argument about whose turn it was to steal shampoo from the drugstore. One time the boyfriend decided to yell, "The Bible says what the Bible says," over and over again for some reason. Almost every day, it would be something different and uniquely annoying. The first real incident happened when I was woken up by screaming and banging against my wall at 1 a.m. I did what I usually did, blasted Kenny G through my speakers at the wall until they shut up. But this time, it didn't work. The banging got louder, so I stopped the music, but then it got worse and sounded like a fight. It was hard to describe, but it sounded like the woman was getting beaten up. At this point, I was more concerned than mad, so I called my superintendent, who told me to call the police. The police came, the neighbors told them everything was fine. The police left, it was quiet, I went back to bed. Literally the next night, I am woken up again at 1 a.m. by my neighbors having another argument. This time, I heard a boom. Then the woman says, "Oh my God," in a weird voice, and then banging, and what sounds like someone being strangled. The noises were freaky and way more concerning than even last time, so I called the police again. The police came, the neighbors told them everything was fine again. The police left again, and it was quiet again. But this time, the police called me back and basically told me I was an idiot for wasting their time. They said there was no evidence of any fight, and both neighbors denied anything even happened. Even the superintendent said that no one else on the floor complained and intimated that I was starting to become a nuisance. I decided from this point forward, I was going to go full Spielberg with video evidence. The noise was bad for the next 6 months, and I would get woken up at least once a week after midnight by yelling and screaming. I made a few written complaints, a few videos as evidence, and sent them to the property manager. There was enough to serve them an eviction notice and go to the landlord-tenant board, but somehow the property manager f***ed up the date for the hearing, and it never actually took place. Thankfully, the noise stopped anyway, for now. So I assumed the neighbors finally got the message and would be quiet from now on. I didn't fight for another hearing, because the eviction notice gave the neighbors an opportunity to be quiet, which they sort of did. As an aside, the video evidence I gathered during this time was beautiful. I was pleasantly surprised that my phone was very good at picking up their voices. It got to the point where I would get excited when I was woken up in the middle of the night, because I would run out into the hallway and film their door and room number as the noise blasted out and echoed down the hall. I gathered some damning unambiguous evidence, pure gold, and it was all time-stamped at around midnight or 1 a.m. But because the hearing got cancelled, I didn't get to present my evidence, at least not yet. For a few months, everything was reasonably okay. They were still loud as f*** during the day, and there were a few times after 11 p.m. on weeknights where I went to their door and asked them to keep it down, but other than that things were mostly better, and I was starting to be able to relax in my place for once. Yet again, it was too good to be true. One day around 2:30 in the afternoon, I start hearing this weird high-pitched screeching coming from my neighbor's place, and it doesn't stop for hours. I'm sitting on my couch trying to figure out what it is. It sounds like a giant tropical bird moved in next door. Well, it turns out, after all the shit we went through a year ago with the noise complaints and eviction notice, my neighbors decided it would be a good idea to get a dog. And of course these obnoxious couldn't just get a quiet, normal, well-behaved dog. They had to get a completely untrained, 4-month-old, tiny yappy Pomeranian that was incapable of being quiet. This thing would yap and screech and bark over and over and over every day for hours. While I'm still coming to terms with how miserable my life is about to become, I get a note under my door. On it, my neighbor writes that she just got the dog as an emotional support animal for her mental health and asks the whole hallway to please try to tolerate the noise. I'd already been living next to and listening to these neighbors scream at each other for over a year. They were confirmed morons, two insane, toxic in a mutually abusive relationship. I knew with certainty that they weren't capable of taking care of this dog properly, and the noise situation would go to complete. And regarding the mental health, I was going through my own troubles during this time, in part due to lack of sleep, and was seeing a therapist. The last year of complaints should have made it clear to anyone that noise was a problem for me, especially getting woken up at night. Of all the things this neighbor could have chosen to help their mental health, they chose the most obnoxious thing possible. They knew getting a loud dog was going to be a problem, and they did it anyway. It was time for war. I realized if I wanted this noise to stop, or to be even taken seriously, I needed a mountain of evidence against my neighbors. I researched the evictions process and everything that was required. I checked the forms my superintendent would have to send out for an eviction notice. I read threads on Reddit about slumlords and neighbor disputes. It became clear to me the only way to win was to be religiously disciplined both in gathering evidence and refusing to retaliate. I became a noise complaint monk, taking a vow of disciplined log-taking and relying on mantras like, "Shut the fuck up, shut the fuck up." Once I submitted my first written complaint, things got bad. My neighbors flipped out when they realized I was complaining again. I heard stuff like, "Of all the apartments in, we have to live next to this for a few days." Then the loud arguments in the middle of the night started all over again, and one of the neighbors got into the new habit of slamming their chest of drawers against my wall at 2 a.m. The barking also got much worse. The emotional support animal letter said that the barking would get better once the dog was trained, but from what I could hear, my neighbors' methods of training began and ended with screaming at the dog, just like they screamed at each other each day. "No, bad dog! Be quiet! Shut the fuck up!" came through my wall in new and varied combinations every day, And every time an argument started between my neighbors, the dog would always join in, even in the middle of the night. The constant level of noise was insane. For over a year, Elle logged every instance of yelling, shouting, and barking coming from my neighbor's apartment. It didn't matter if it was after 11 p.m. or not at this point. I was trying to demonstrate how I can't get peace at any time of day. And when I say every instance, I mean I had minute-to-minute logs of every loud noise and every word I heard from my neighbor's wall. If I was woken up in the middle of the night, it went in the log. If I heard the dog bark from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. on February 2nd, it went in the log. If I heard someone yell, "You peed on the floor again," at the dog, it went in the log. Honestly, it sucked, and made me almost lose my mind. But by the time I was done, I had pages and pages of notes. Obviously, written logs wouldn't be enough. I already had a decently fat stack of video evidence to demonstrate the true character of my neighbors, but I needed current evidence if there was going to be another hearing. Spielberg. Now I was Coppola in the heart of darkness. I got more videos of screaming and shouting coming out of their door. I got videos of banging and barking against my shared wall. I got videos of screaming, shouting, banging, and barking all at the same time, or in any combination. I had amassed a war chest of video evidence to be deployed at the next available hearing, but I was getting war-weary. At this point, I was like 6 or 8 months into the complaints process, and I could barely take it anymore. I was getting woken up like 2 nights a week and would be a zombie at work. I complained about my neighbors at work often. I was finding it harder and harder to keep myself from blasting music, or banging on their wall, or kicking their door down. But I managed to stay strong, and I followed the eviction process like it was my religion. I sent in a second written complaint, then a third, which resulted in an eviction notice, which gave the neighbors an opportunity to be quiet. This time, they didn't give a fuck. If anything, they were louder than ever before. I was looking for other places to move into when I finally get good news from the property manager. There's a hearing date. There was light at the end of the tunnel, but once the neighbors heard about the hearing date, they did everything they could to fuck me up. There were no attempts to stop the barking anymore. It was constant. The screaming matches were back in full force, and when they started yelling and screaming, the dog would go nuts. It was just an insane amount of noise. And the drawers were ridiculous. Honestly, I never expected the slamming drawers to be that bad, but they easily eclipsed the barking and the shouting. They would slam and slam and slam the drawers over and over again against my wall. And because of the plaster, it would boom, 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 and echo through my whole place. These assholes were definitely doing it on purpose. 3 days before the hearing date, I go to bed at 9:45 p.m. At 10 p.m., I'm still not asleep, but I'm startled by boom boom of the drawers. I log it and go back to bed. At 11:30 p.m., I wake up to boom 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 again, and I'm pissed off. It takes me half an hour, but I fall asleep again. Then, at 12:45 a.m., boom, 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 boom. There it is again. I call my superintendent, tell her what's going on. The super calls them and tells them to stop. I fall back asleep. Then at 1:30 a.m., boom, boom, boom. I wake up super angry. It's obvious they're doing this on purpose to piss me off before the hearing and get a reaction out of me. I call the super again and go back to sleep again. Then at 2:45 a.m., boom, boom, boom. I can't take it anymore. I scream, "Do it again! Do it again!" I lost it. I couldn't help myself. My discipline broke. My superintendent calls me and tells me my neighbors just said I yelled a death threat through the wall. What the f***? And that they're calling the police. What the f***? Everything just feels now. I can't sleep, so I just wait until morning. No police show up and I go to work. I realized I couldn't even stay at my place anymore until this hearing was over, so I went back to my brother's couch for the next 3 days. Finally, the big day arrives. I gather my evidence. Over a year of meticulously logged noise complaints, 6 instances of video evidence. I cherry-picked the gold out of 20 good ones. The previous eviction notice the neighbors received, 4 written noise complaints, including the 2 from the previous eviction notice, a letter from my coworker about poor work performance due to lack of sleep, and even a letter from my therapist about how my neighbor's excessive noise was affecting my mental health. I got there and met the property manager and superintendent, who were there with the owner of the property management company and a slick-looking lawyer. I handed the lawyer all my evidence. I gave him a USB stick with the videos. I even handed over my big Bluetooth speaker to make sure the videos were loud enough to hear. Laptop speakers suck. I look over to my neighbors, and they are wide-eyed. They look scared. Finally, we all go into the landlord-tenant boardroom with everybody. The adjudicator first asks if anyone wants to mediate instead of going through with the hearing. My neighbor's hand immediately shoots up. I say in front of everybody, I don't want to mediate. But apparently it's not up to me, and the lawyer takes me aside. The lawyer tells me if it goes to mediation, the neighbors and the property management create an agreement. For example, no more noise at X o'clock, and if that agreement is broken, once it results in an immediate eviction. He explains, if we go in front of the board, instead it's a 50-50th chance they either get evicted or get off completely. Obviously, mediation is the better way to go. I know these idiots are already incapable of keeping quiet, so I agree with the lawyer. We go out to find the neighbors, and they're nowhere to be found. Turns out they opted for the free legal counsel. I wonder why, and won't be available until the afternoon. While waiting, I explained to the property manager, owner, and lawyer what happened a few days ago with the slamming drawers all night long. When I made my complaints before, no one really took them seriously, but today everyone is very interested in everything I have to say. The afternoon comes, and I'm excluded from the mediation meeting because it's between the neighbors, the lawyer, and the owner. I can't hear what they're saying, but I can hear my neighbors yelling and shouting from inside the room, so I know it's not going well for them. Everyone leaves the room and the lawyer comes up to me. He tells me the mediation failed, the neighbors refused to change their behavior, and won't accept any terms. The lawyer says they have to go in front of the adjudicator again. But by now, it's almost the end of the day. I wait another hour or two, and everyone comes out. I see my neighbors leave as the lawyer comes by again and explains. Apparently, after the mediation failed, the property management owner offered my neighbors 2 months rent-free if they agreed to move out in 2 months. The neighbors agreed, but when they all went in front of the adjudicator, the neighbors changed their minds and said no. And apparently a second offer was made, which they said yes to. And then no again, all in front of the adjudicator. They ended up running out of time, and the adjudicator cut the hearing short and said it would have to be resolved in a second hearing. I was disappointed, but the lawyer assured me that because of how capricious and insane my neighbors behaved during the hearing, they would almost certainly be evicted during a second hearing. I was dismayed that it wasn't over, but hopeful the end was coming soon. I also felt vindicated. It was finally clear to everyone that my neighbors were actually insane, and I wasn't just making this up. The next 2 months weren't as bad as before. I continued my long, steady march of logs and videos, but the noise definitely let up, especially the drawers. One day near the end of the second month, I started to hear insane barking. It would not stop. It went on for hours and hours and hours. I called the superintendent to complain when they told me it was probably because the neighbors were moving out today. Yes. Ha ha ha. Finally. Apparently, she couldn't tell me earlier because of privacy reasons. As they were moving out, I blasted "Na Na Hey Hey Kiss Him Goodbye" on loop, put in some earplugs, and took a 2-hour bath. My apartment is quiet now, and I can finally sleep. It wasn't exactly the satisfying, crushing blow I wanted, but my discipline paid off, and now I can live in peace. I apologize for the length of this in advance. This happened some years ago, but still seems relevant today, so I thought I would share the story. So back in the 90s, I was working for a European-based financial firm. US offices were managed by Europeans with a regional head office in New York. Promised reward was being promoted to a director position where the salary, perks, and bonus structure would really kick in. Kind of like how law firms promote their younger lawyers to partners after a long wait. As junior associates, the only good news was that we received the same 5 weeks of vacation per year, plus a few weeks of sick leave, as our European counterparts, which for me meant a lot of camping and staycations during the summer, since I didn't really make enough to travel to exotic/expensive locations. The offices were set up in a way where the business development, BD, directors each had a junior associate. The BD guys would generally network, schmooze, and travel around their territories to meet clients and new prospects. Once back in the office, the BD guys would dump their meeting notes on the desks of their junior associates to follow up and land the business, aka a hunter/Skinner model. As a junior associate, I was pretty busy assisting a BD, so I routinely rolled over at least 2 weeks of vacation every year. I had worked at the firm for 3 years, and was starting to get antsy for a promotion. Right after Thanksgiving, my boss in the West Coast office told me that I was being transferred and promoted to the Southeast office come the new year. I really had no interest in working in and living in the Southeast, but I wanted to advance my career. I rolled over my usual 2 weeks of vacation into the next year, so I was eligible for 7 weeks of vacation that next year. After celebrating New Year's with my family in CA, I packed up my car and drove across the country. Once in the new office, I settled in and met my new boss, who promptly informed me that he wasn't actually promoting me to director, though I was being given the responsibilities of the role, as he judged me to be too young, but was also told that if I demonstrated that I could do the job, I would be promoted next year. I was pissed, but didn't have a choice other than moving back home and starting from scratch, so I agreed to it. I disliked my new boss instantly, as coworkers told me he was flaunting his management perks, which consisted of large allowances for housing and automobiles, which were paid for by sales production from employees like myself. Turned out he was related to a serving member of the board of directors back in Europe, which is how he got the job as a regional manager. Everyone knew he didn't have the skills to do our job, so he just collected fat checks, went to expensive restaurants with friends, and billed it to the company as client development, all the while leasing a new Mercedes every 2 years on the company's dime, while generally being a d*** to everyone who worked for him. During the first week, I also met my junior associate, Jeremy. We sat down and discussed some accounts that I'd inherited that were in backwater locations none of the other directors wanted to visit. Jeremy was professional, but I got the distinct impression Jeremy hated me, though I didn't know why. I started traveling around to meet my clients and prospects over the next few weeks, usually spending at least 3 or 4 days on the road, back in the office on Fridays, to go over follow-ups on business leads with Jeremy and execute whatever paperwork needed to be taken care of. About a month later, I returned from one of my trips and learned that Jeremy had quit. It turned out that he was mad that he'd been passed over for the position that I'd been given. I couldn't fault him, as I probably would have done the same thing. I asked my manager to hire someone else to back me up, but he was hesitant to do so, reasoning that my client portfolio was just starting out, so I could do both roles until it made sense to staff up. I pointed out that it would be hard to be an effective business development officer if I had no support system to help grow my client portfolio. But he chose not to listen, knowing that I had little recourse but to shut the hell up. I spent the rest of the year working my ass off. This was right before email and internet were common, so executing business on the road was hard. Fax machines were the bane of my existence. Even though laptops were reserved for directors, my boss was kind enough, heavy sarcasm, to let me use a company laptop on which I would handle all of the paperwork to process client business from hotel business centers late at night or early in the morning. So I learned to live on 5 hours of sleep or to sleep on planes whenever I could. After dealing with problems from some irate clients, I eventually paid for my own personal cell phone. Not everyone had them in the mid-90s, and our directors had just started getting company-paid phones that year, as I had to handle customers from the road. I just gave my personal cell number for clients to call so I could handle problems from the road. I landed a few big clients by a combination of luck and hard work, and got some solid referrals, which led to more referrals, so within a few months I was gaining some serious momentum. Since I didn't have an associate to help me, that meant I spent the weekends and late nights back at the office handling paperwork, then back on the road during the week. I was so busy working both sides of the job that by December of that year, I hadn't taken my mandatory 2 weeks of vacation. I had some new clients that needed to be handled by year-end, so I was granted a vacation waiver, meaning that my 7 weeks of vacation would roll over into the next year, adding up to 12 weeks of vacation plus sick time for the coming year. It was a big hassle for HR to process the waiver, but since I had produced a lot of new business, my manager was all too happy to order it done. I wasn't upset about working through year-end, though I flew back and forth to CA for Christmas on a 24-hour turnaround. I rationalized it, hoping that I would get paid the first big bonus of my career in a few months. At that time, European firms paid their bonuses in mid-April, while employees of US-based firms got their bonuses by end of January. If you were planning on switching jobs early in the new year, working at a European firm meant that sometimes you left money on the table, aka golden handcuffs. So the timing of switching firms was important. I continued to work at my frenetic pace through April. taking no vacation as I was bringing in more and more clients, and digging myself out of paperwork when I wasn't on the road. In the new year, we had some meetings about scorecards and sales goals, and I let my office in some of the categories and was number one for overall production. Finally, in mid-April, my boss called me in and announced it was time to discuss my bonus/annual review. I eagerly sat down, licking my chops because I was assuming my bonus would be equal to my base salary at least, if not double. He handed me a piece of paper, and it showed a number that was almost 90% less than I was expecting for my bonus. I literally laughed out loud and told him it was a little late for an April Fool's joke, but he wasn't smiling. He proceeded to tell me how proud he was of me, but that since I wasn't a director, the bonus that I received was the maximum amount he would give me, as there wasn't any more money in the budget. I sat there in shock for a while, then kept asking the same question in different ways. Basically, why did he screw me on my bonus? It was like talking to a brick wall. Despite pointing to the scorecard that showed me as the best producer in the office, all the while having no junior associate, he wasn't having it. I was crushed, but then asked him if he was promoting me to director since I had demonstrated that I could produce, hoping that title would be a gateway into the big payday the following year. He shook his head and replied, "Maybe next year if you prove this year wasn't a fluke." It was a gut punch. He also rationalized that while my review was positive, I had some flaws that I needed to work on. Mainly, that I didn't work very well in a team atmosphere. I reminded him that I was a team of one, so there wasn't anybody on my team to complain about me. A switch finally flipped in my brain as I realized I'd just gotten majorly screwed and there was no changing the outcome. I told him that I was feeling ill and would be taking some sick days, so I got up and left his office. Coworkers said I looked as white as a ghost as I walked out of his office, so they knew something was wrong. I forwarded my incoming calls to his extension, packed up my important papers in case I decided to never come back, then headed to my apartment in a complete rage. I called my family and told them that I needed to come home for some much-deserved vacation, so after drinking myself senseless for 48 hours and forwarding all my calls to voicemail, I called into work the following Monday and told my boss I would be taking a vacation week. He was pretty angry about the short notice, as he'd been dealing with my irate clients contacting him about their problems, since I couldn't be reached, and he didn't have much of a clue as to how to handle the paperwork necessary to do the work. So other associates were now being called in to help handle my workload. I flew home and made a few calls to people I'd worked with, hoping for some job leads. I managed to grab a lunch with an old associate who had left the firm, and he gave me some ideas and contacts, so I spent the rest of my vacation looking for a new job. I knew the timing sucked so out of options, I went back to my job the following week. First day back, I looked at my HR data and realized that I still had 11 weeks of vacation to use that year, plus a few more weeks of sick leave. Around that time, there was a company-wide conference call to celebrate a big company milestone. I think the firm was 125 years old, but didn't care anymore. To celebrate the big anniversary, we were told we would be getting an extra week of vacation that year, meaning once again, I had 3 months of vacation in my account. As a high performer, I was also selected to spend a few weeks in New York during the summer and fall for some management training, so that meant additional time out of the office. The next month was a blur of looking at different vacations options for me to take that year. I had accrued a lot of hotel/rental car points and frequent flyer miles during the past year of traveling around, so I spent my days in the office doing as little client work as I could get away with, while spending the rest of my time on the phone with the frequent flyer/hotel points, customer service reps, trying to squeeze as much vacation out of my miles and points as I could. By the end of May, I submitted my vacation requests, which detailed how I was going to take 3 months of vacation in the 7 remaining months of the year. I submitted the forms to HR, and within a day, my boss called me in to discuss my schedule, as he realized I was basically going to be gone for almost 2 weeks out of every month for the rest of the year. I was wrapping my vacations around federal and bank holidays whenever I could manage it. He told me that he was rejecting my vacation schedule since there wasn't anybody to cover my clients in my absence. I asked him to call in the HR rep into his office to have his stance officially on record. He objected, but I said I wouldn't discuss such matters without an HR rep present. HR was called in, and my boss told HR he was rejecting my vacation schedule, But HR responded that I was legally entitled to take the vacation days, so he couldn't reject the request. I also told him that henceforth I wouldn't be handling any of my customers from my personal cell phone if I was out of the office, so I would be forwarding my work phone to his when I was on vacation or doing business development trips. Also told him I was going to Europe on 2 different trips and would be unable to be contacted since I didn't have a company-issued cell phone. He was pissed, but knew that unless he promoted me to director and issue me a cell phone, he couldn't do anything about my new stance. After that, I only did business development in areas where I like to travel, and more importantly, vacation. Until that point, I had always said yes to any meetings in backwater locations if it represented a chance to land a new client. Having learned my lesson the hard way, I didn't want any new clients to begin with, and certainly none living in areas I didn't like to visit. Trips to Florida became common. If I was traveling, I would typically spend Monday to Wednesday making very infrequent sales calls. Most of my schedule was falsified with fake prospects, so I could spend afternoons playing golf or hanging out at hotel pools trolling for women my age. Then would take off Thursday and Friday with vacation/sick days so I could hang out and have fun, using hotel points to extend my stays for free. Since I was still underpaid, I ate cheaply and learned to squeeze as much out of my trips for the least amount of money I could manage while still having fun. My boss was now irate with all of the customer calls coming to him, but he refused to hire an assistant for me, so I kept forwarding my line to his when I was out of office. Whenever I was back in the office, pretty infrequent at this point, he would routinely lambaste me with verbal warnings about poor performance reviews, but I would just shrug my shoulders and tell him that maybe he was right not to promote me to director, since I was such a disappointment. He was also pissed because he'd been commended for having such a high-producing office the year before, mostly courtesy of my efforts. And now, he was getting a lot of heat from New York that his new client numbers were down. Since I had frequent flyer miles and hotel points, but not a lot of money, I backpacked through Europe on 2 different 2-week trips that summer, and also took a number of vacations back home, diligently following up on job leads on the West Coast that I had cultivated whenever I was in the office. By October, I started to firm up some conversations with a prospective employer back in California, and finally received a concrete job offer in mid-November. I waited until December 15th to inform my boss that I was quitting the firm, and told him I would be using my 2 remaining weeks of vacation/sick leave so that my resignation was effective immediately. He was surprised that I didn't wait until April to leave, but I laughed, telling him I knew he was going to screw me on my bonus anyway, so the money wasn't worth waiting around for. He then asked me to stay through the end of January in order to give him enough time to hire and train an assistant or a replacement to handle my clients. I refused, noting that Jeremy had quit 20 months before, so he had plenty of time to prepare for this eventuality. As I was packing up my office and informing coworkers about my departure, I got a knock on my office door from the HR rep as he wanted to conduct an exit interview. He closed the door and I aired out all of my dirty laundry. I told HR the firm had lost me when my boss had screwed me on my bonus, repeating the story that there wasn't any money in the budget. The HR counterpart shook his head and laughed at my boss's stupidity, noting that since Jeremy had been an employee at the beginning of the year I'd arrived, his salary and bonus was actually in the budget for the whole year. As such, my boss could have allocated the amount that he would have paid Jeremy to my bonus, which probably would have kept me reasonably happy. Instead, he decided to screw me over. I moved back to California that week and started the new job the first week of January. 3 months into my new job, I got a call from a coworker at my previous firm. He called to tell me that after I left, HR from the head office in New York came down early in the new year to interview my former coworkers. Apparently, my sudden departure had raised some eyebrows in New York, as they viewed me as a rising star, and questions were asked why I left so abruptly. Apparently, other employees in my office had also gotten screwed in various ways. Lots of client development meal expenses were rejected for being too expensive by the guy who was routinely billing his meals with friends to the firm. So after listening to all of the complaints, New York management decided to make a change year before he was due to be rotated back to Europe. Since he was related to a guy on the board, they couldn't fire him, so they reassigned my old boss to some backwater farm town. I couldn't pronounce the town, but was told it was the kind of place that doesn't provide perks like allowances for housing, accounts for expensive steak restaurants, or a new Mercedes. I started my own company 5 years back, and it's worked out pretty well. Even though I got screwed 25 years ago, I always think about that experience fondly, as I probably would have worked for a company like that for my entire life had I not been shown how companies and bosses will generally screw you over if given half a chance. It was eye-opening and put me on a path to eventually start my own firm, so for that I'm forever grateful. I always think about that situation around New Year's to remind myself of how far I've come and for how not to treat my employees. Hopefully some of you can benefit from my experience without all of the drama I went through. Happy New Year! TLDR. So busy at a new job that I didn't even have time to take a vacation. Boss screwed me on my bonus after I was the top producer, so I dumped my customers back into his lap and spent the rest of the year on fake sales calls or on vacation. Quit and eventually started my own company. The revenge was really satisfying and up to the mark. Screwing up people is a norm in the corporate sector, but OP's boss messed with the wrong person. OP took full advantage of his 12 weeks privileged leaves and struck a heavy revenge, and the final was to establish a successful competitor company. The revenge was truly mind-blowing. Let's now move on to the next story from Basecap, where OP got. Back in the early 2010s, I started working for a big internet-based company in the UK. The company was opening a new office with a new subdivision in London. When I started, there were 2 team leaders and the office manager. The 2 teams were the content team and the SEO, search engine optimization, team. I was recruited to be the development team lead, that is, web development. When I was interviewed for the job, both the office manager and SEO team lead were conducting the interview. During the interview, I would respond, "Yes, of course," or "You know you would get a better result doing X, Y, or Z." So, I got offered the job, and for the first year, there was so much going on. As well as building a team, I also had a portfolio of websites that needed to be redeveloped and redesigned. It was at this point that some flags started to pop up. I would have the SEO team lead, we will call him Andy, coming to me and telling me that I needed to do things the way he wanted. I would always push back and say no, and give a reason why I was doing things the way I was. Andy would get irate and would complain to the office manager about me. When the office manager would ask me about it, I would explain what had happened and why I had said no, and the office manager would leave it there because at the end of the day, I was the one with the experience in web development, not Andy. This happened a few times over the first year, and I then realized that the reason Andy was getting so irate was that he thought that I would be a yes man to him. Sorry, buddy, that is not who I am. So now that we have the backstory, let's get into what led to the revenge. Me and the team had been working hard to get 2 of the new websites completed, and I was due to show them off to the board before they went live. This company's head office was in another part of the country, and I had to leave the office in London at about lunchtime. So, I arrived at the hotel across the road from the head office around 4 p.m. and jumped on my laptop to start going through the sites to run some tests. I was testing functionality, making sure the look and feel were correct, things like that. Then it happened. We found a major bug that caused a significant issue with the functionality of the website. So, it is at this point that I am going to introduce the star of our story, Johnny, not real name but attacked all the same, who was my senior developer. Me and Johnny worked through the night, me in the hotel room and him in the London office. We finally fixed the bug at about 7 a.m. The following day, my meeting with the board was at 10 a.m. So after getting showered, fed, and over to the office, I started my day with 0 hours of sleep. I go into the meeting, and the first thing that is said is the CEO asking if I was okay. I had met him a few times, and he was a really nice guy. I explained that we had found an issue with the sites yesterday, and me and Johnny had worked through the night to fix it before the meeting. Long story short, everyone was really impressed and loved the new sites. At the end of the meeting, the CEO pulled me aside and thanked me for everything, and then told me to go home and get some sleep. It was about a 3-hour train ride to London, and then another hour home. I thanked him, and I was on my way. After taking my team out for a well-deserved lunch to say thank you, the office manager then organized a night out for the whole office to celebrate on the following Friday. We started off at a fancy bar. Not my sort of thing. I am a man of cheap tastes. And then everyone moved on to a small club. I went to the club for a bit, but then left quite early in the night as I needed to get a train home. I said my goodbyes and then headed home. I came into the office on Monday and there was something going on. I spoke with Emma, not real name, the content team's lead. She did not know what was going on, but there were people from the head office, HR, and others. Then a few minutes later, all the team leaders were called into a meeting. We were all squished in one of the small meeting rooms. There was the office manager, 2 members of the HR team from the head office, and the 3 team leaders, including myself. So, HR explained that there had been a complaint made against Johnny. A member of the SEO team, we will call him Mark, had called Andy on Friday, saying that Johnny had been making racist comments while everyone was out at the club. Both myself and Emma were taken aback. This was not like Johnny. On a side note, I felt that I needed to explain the races of people involved. This is just for context, and not an attack on anyone involved. Johnny, Emma, and I are white British. Andy is African, born in Britain, I believe, and Mark is Indian, once again, I believe. The whole day was spent with HR doing interviews with the other people that were there that night, and we then all reconvened towards the end of the day. The result of the interviews was that no one had heard anything like what Mark was saying. So it was Mark's word against Johnny's. This was not acceptable for Andy. He wanted Johnny fired and cried, "We could not have someone like that in the office." Both Emma and I looked at each other and thought that it was strange that he was so insistent on firing Johnny with no evidence. Both the office manager and HR agreed, and Johnny was let off with a warning, and to be aware in the future of how things he says could be misinterpreted. Life went back to normal in the office. That is, until about 2 months later. The story of what had happened had gone around the office, about 12 people. Then one afternoon, I was pulled aside by one of the guys on the content team, and he said that he had overheard Andy and Mark talking, and thought I should know. We went into one of the meeting rooms, and he laid everything out. What I heard made my blood boil, and I think had I been in a cartoon, I would have been erupting from my ears. He told me that the racism complaint was faked, and a plan that Andy had to attack my team because I would not bend to his demands. He and Mark were on a call outside the club. Andy was not there that night, and that is when he heard what they were doing. It later came out that their plan was to make the complaint against Johnny and get him fired, which would then lead on to Andy complaining that I was not fit to run a team if I let that sort of thing happen under my leadership. My first question was why he didn't bring this up with HR in the interviews. He said that he did, but it was his word against both Andy and Mark. I thanked him for this and went on with what I was doing. I was pissed. There was no way that I was going to let this slide, but I knew that if I was going to go after them, I needed to have everything in place beforehand. I didn't tell Johnny what I had been told, and asked the guy that told me to keep it to himself for now. I didn't want Johnny to get upset and do something that would get him fired or worse, affect any revenge I could dish out. So, I watched. I watched everything the SEO team did and didn't do. Then it happened. It was like angels had descended from heaven to deliver me the winning lottery ticket. The building we were in was a 3-story building with a main staircase with a door on each floor to the offices. The stairs also lead to a door out to the street. At the time, I was a casual smoker and used it to get a break from the screen and clear my head if something I was working on was not going well. So, I walked out of the door to the office and into the stairwell. And who is there? Mark of all people. He is on the phone, and he goes white as a sheet when he sees me. Now he is mid-sentence with the person on the other end of the phone, and as I am walking past, he is forced to carry on the conversation. I overhear, and from what he is saying, I can tell that he is talking to a school or something like that. The conversation sounded like he was looking for information about applying and about a visa. I thought that was a strange call to be having, and something was fishy about it. I had my suspicions as to what was going on, but nothing concrete at this time. A few days later, I was heading back up to the head office, and by that time, we had a new office manager who lived near the head office, so was based there most of the time. When I got there, I dropped my things off at the hotel and headed over to the office. I went to his desk and asked to have a quick chat. I explained to him what I had overheard Mark talking about on the phone and said that maybe the company might like to look at his visa status. A week went by and nothing seemed to happen. Then, bam! He stopped showing up at the office. A few days later, I got told what had happened by one of the other SEO team members. Mark had been fired with immediate effect for no longer having the correct visa to work in the UK. The company did not want to get involved in sponsoring a new visa for him. I don't know why. I started asking questions around the office, random chit-chat, and I found out that Mark is from Dubai, and he was here on his wife's student visa. I don't know how that works, but it was all above board. I also found out that his wife's course had finished, and that left them with a small window of time to get a new visa. That is when it all clicked. Now there are some dodgy people in London and everywhere else, and they would set up these fake colleges that would sign people up to get visas to live and work in the UK. At some point before or after this, I saw a program on this, and normally these were set up in tiny offices that you couldn't swing a cat in, let alone be a college. They were used as postal addresses for the college, and they would charge a course fee to be enrolled, and thus be able to apply for a student visa. So, what Mark was trying to do is to get enrolled in one of these colleges so that he could stay in the UK and carry on working. I found out a few weeks later that Mark and his wife did have to leave the UK and go back to Dubai because he didn't have any money coming in to pay for his new college course. Bye, Mark. When I found out that Mark had been let go, I pulled Johnny aside and filled him in on everything. He could not believe it and was stunned that they would try and do that. I apologized to him, as it was my fault that he had been targeted by them in a way to get at me. He would not accept it and said that I had gone above and beyond in defending him. Following on from this, I made it quite clear to Andy that I knew what he and Mark had done, and that I would not be forgetting it, and to watch his back. I made sure we were not in earshot of anyone else. About 2 months later, Andy handed in his notice and left the company, never to be seen or heard from again. I have told this story to some people over the years, and I have been asked so many times if I feel guilty for what I did. I always respond the same way. I feel guilty that Johnny was wrongfully accused and targeted. I don't feel guilty about what I did to Mark. You don't mess with my friends, family, or team. AITA for telling my sister, I don't know if I love her after finding out about her 5-year affair. My sister, 32, moved in with me because she got pregnant 5 months ago from what she claimed was a one-night stand. I love my sister, so of course I took her in. My husband is overseas for 6 more months, so it was nice to have her around because I care about her very much. On Monday, I came home and saw my sister and a strange woman in a screaming match on my doorstep. I obviously didn't know what was happening, but I saw the woman poking my pregnant sister's shoulder, so I intervened. I sent my sister inside, and she begged me to send the woman away. I didn't understand what was going on, but I wanted the altercation to end for everyone's sake, so I told the woman as much. Then she started screaming, asking me if I was also sleeping with her husband. I was like, WTF? And then she basically revealed that my sister had been having an affair with her husband for 5 years. 5 years. She had everything printed out. Chats, photos, emails, receipts. It was disturbing to see, and I didn't want to go through it all. But a few things were established. My sister knew about his wife. She knew she was the mistress and liked it. This woman was a stay-at-home mom to their 4 kids, one of whom has a severe disability from a car accident. Her husband knew about my sister's pregnancy and even took her on a baby moon to celebrate it. The affair had been going on the entire time, with my sister believing he would eventually leave his wife for her. My sister had fully embraced the role of being the other woman and was emotionally invested in their relationship, despite his repeated lies about leaving his wife. I told the woman I was very sorry and that I obviously didn't know, but I asked her to leave because this wasn't going anywhere, and I didn't want the neighbors to call the police. She was furious but gave me her number on a post-it, begging me not to let her husband stay at my house. I assured her that no man was stepping foot in my home. My sister was begging me not to believe the woman, calling her a vindictive ex-wife. I told her, all right then, let's look up the marriage online. Let's see if a motion for dissolution of marriage was ever submitted. We fought hard. My sister kept saying I would never understand, and that they loved each other, but he just couldn't leave his wife, blah blah blah. I called her dumb and naive. The next day, I told her she could stay here because I didn't want her to become a financial burden on that woman in any way. But I also told her that, right now, I didn't want to engage with her. My sister asked me if I still loved her, and I told her honestly, right now, I can't say I do. I will always help my nephew and not endanger you. But I can't like you because you've shown me you're not a trustworthy person. I told her I didn't trust her not to try anything with my husband, and I didn't trust her with anything at all. So I made her sign a tenant's agreement. She's been begging me to forgive her, and I told her there's nothing to forgive. I just don't know who she is anymore. Update. First, I'd like to clarify a few things. I am not going to tell my sister to get rid of the baby. That's not my place, and I would never suggest such a thing. Also, I am not going to install tracking software on her phone or demand access to all her devices. That's invasive and wrong. I've been thinking a lot, and while I can't say that I don't love my sister, it's very hard to feel that love right now. I don't know who she is anymore. It's not just that she lied to me, it's what she did, and how convinced she is that she was justified because they were in love. She's brought chaos into my home that I opened up to her. I'm deeply disappointed in her, and I just don't like her at the moment. I'm letting her stay with me because I don't want her to become dependent on him. I don't think he's a good man either, and as a social worker, I've seen these scenarios too many times. My sister is already deluded. I don't need to open the door to a dependency that's also financial. Now, onto the update. I haven't been punishing my sister, but I've been treating her like a roommate. This is driving her crazy. She's begging me to go back to how things were before, but I can't. I told her that I need time, and that things can't just return to normal overnight. She tried to explain how it all happened. She admitted that she always knew he was married, but believed she could tell how unhappy he was, and felt he deserved to be happy. They met at a bar a few weeks after his son's accident. He told her that his wife hadn't touched him since it happened, and that he was about to explode. I asked her why she would involve herself with a married man, knowing the hurt it would cause. She said she wanted to be a wife and a good mom, and that included his kids. She had hoped he would divorce his wife so they could all move on and finally be happy together. I just stared at her, unable to comprehend how she could rationalize her actions. A few days later, he appeared at our house, claiming he had left his wife and wanted to be with my sister. I told him to leave immediately or I would call the police. My sister was furious with me, accusing me of ruining her chance at happiness. I made it clear to her, if he comes over again, I will evict her. She's free to date anyone she wants, but not under my roof. I also told her that if she plans to have him around after the baby is born, she'll need to find her own place. Word has gotten around our community about the affair. While we were grocery shopping, a woman even spat on my sister. Many of her friends have cut ties with her, calling her a homewrecker. Some are married themselves and don't want her near their husbands. I haven't said "I told you so" even once. We unexpectedly ran into his wife at a local cafe. My sister wanted to apologize and suggested that maybe they could all have a good relationship for the sake of the kids. The wife laughed coldly and said, "You made your choices. Now live with them. Don't expect me to make this easier for you." My sister is devastated and has been lying in bed ever since. I'm taking care of her physical needs, making sure she eats, stays hydrated, and attends her prenatal appointments. But I can't bring myself to comfort her emotionally. I just don't have it in me right now. Second and final update. My sister just won't stop talking about him. Every day, it's the same story. Their perfect future together. The apartment they're moving into. How everything will be great once his divorce is done. She's completely lost in this delusion, acting like none of the lies and betrayal matter. I can't stand it. She made him write me letters. Yes, actual letters. As if that's going to magically make me approve of him. She leaves them around the house, thinking that if I just read them, I'll suddenly understand how sorry he is and how much he loves her. I haven't responded to a single one. It's ridiculous. I told her over and over that I don't want anything to do with him, but she keeps pushing, as if she can wear me down. It's beyond frustrating. Then came the talk of moving in together. She sat me down and asked for my blessing, telling me how important it was to her that I support their relationship. She actually wanted me to meet him, to give him a chance. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. That's when I drew the line. I told her flat out, if she moves in with him, I'm done. I told her I would go low contact, that I wouldn't be part of their life, and that she's on her own if she goes through with this. If she wanted my support, she had to leave him, full stop. For a moment, I thought she was finally getting it. She showed me screenshots from his ex-wife. The ex had pretended she wanted him back, and this guy fell for it immediately. He told her how much he missed her, how my sister was a mistake, how he wanted to fix things with his family. My sister was crushed. She came to me with the screenshots, crying, and I thought, for a couple of days, that maybe, just maybe, she would finally see him for who he really is. I was hopeful. But then, as usual, he wormed his way back in. He told her he only said those things because he was afraid his ex would take the kids away. And of course, she bought it. Now she's actively moving in with him, packing up her things and making all these plans like nothing happened. The screenshots? Forgotten? The lies? Excused. She's determined to be with him no matter what, and I am done. I told her I'm not helping her anymore. No more driving her to appointments, no more checking on her, nothing. I'm not going to pretend everything's okay while she's diving headfirst into this disaster. Now, I barely talk to her. If she asks where the tea is, I'll tell her. If she wants to know if there's milk left, I'll answer. But that's it. I'm emotionally cut off, and I told her straight. I'll be here if things fall apart, if she's in danger, but I am not going to be a part of this train wreck. She's on her own now. The community backlash hasn't slowed down either. Everywhere we go, people are whispering, staring, and judging. They're not just looking at her, they're looking at me too. People know she's living with me, and I've started hearing comments at work about why I haven't completely cut her off. It's affecting my life now, and I just can't carry her mistakes anymore. Her friends? All gone. The ones who were married have cut ties completely. She's isolated herself, but instead of waking up, she's clinging harder to him, holding on to this fantasy that everything will work out. But I'm done caring. She's made her choice, and now she has to live with the fallout. This is the final update because I'm finished. I'm done trying, done caring, done dealing with the mess she's made. She can have her life with him, but I'm not going to be part of it. OP is not an AH for setting boundaries. Despite all that OP's sister did, OP took her in and provided essential support, and she cannot be an AH for refusing to enable the toxic relationship. OP's frustration and emotional detachment from her sister is understandable and reasonable because her sister has been continuously making poor choices. OP's actions fall under the umbrella of tough love. As for OP's sister, she is a big a-hole for making such a mean choice and expecting so much from a man who impregnated her without leaving his first wife. So, I would give her a 2.5 out of 5 on the AH scale. And that man is the biggest AH for playing two women. And I would give him 3.5 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now jump onto the next story from quirky_bad_499. During our date night, I saw my wife dancing with another man and I got mad. AITA? My wife and I went salsa dancing for date night the other night, something we rarely get to do since having our first baby 18 months ago. With no family nearby to help with childcare and babysitters being expensive, it was only our second time going out alone since our child was born. We were having a great time, but at one point I went to the washroom. I was gone for no more than 5 minutes, and when I came back, I saw her on the dance floor dancing with another man. I felt it was really disrespectful and got upset. I stood there watching, and when she saw me, I threw my hands up like, "What the hell?" She just smiled and kept dancing with him. So, I walked over, tapped the guy on the shoulder, and he immediately stopped and apologized. After he left, my wife got really mad, called me controlling, and spent the rest of the evening sitting at the bar, sulking. I told her I thought it was disrespectful to dance with someone else while on a date with me, but she wasn't having it. AITA? Edit. Many are saying this is normal for salsa dancing, especially in social halls. In this case, this was not a social dance hall. People dancing with their partners were not frequently switching partners. It was more of a club setting. So, she would have been spotted by herself and approached by a man to dance with her. She did not have to accept the dance, in my opinion. She thinks it was harmless. Edit 2. I talked to my wife. She has doubled down and said I completely overreacted and needlessly ruined our night. She admitted that the guy dancing with her told her she was beautiful and flirted with her and that she was flattered. When I asked if she told him she was married, she said she didn't because she didn't have time to. I had returned from the washroom by then. I am very upset by this and I don't know where to go from here. Sorry guys for the information drip. It is hard to type everything out while looking after my toddler. Some more clarification, particularly around communicating boundaries. I have always communicated my expectations and boundaries with her. We never had a conversation that included this particular scenario. Would you dance with someone else and allow them to flirt with you if I stepped away for 5 to 10 minutes while we were on a date together? But we have discussed boundaries and how we expect to conduct ourselves when out without the other. She has had girls' nights out prior to our child's birth, and she always told me if someone had approached her and how she'd handled it. It was never an issue. We were always on the same page. This is the first time she downplays crossing boundaries, which were previously agreed upon, and providing me with half-truths, unless I ask. When I address those concerns, she says I am overreacting. Edit 3. My wife chatted again about this tonight. As many of you have suggested, I asked my wife how she would feel if she came back from the bathroom and found me dancing with another woman, someone I likely asked to dance, since it's less common for women to approach men. She admitted she would feel jealous and wouldn't want me to do that. When I pointed out the hypocrisy, she argued that it's different because, in her view, accepting a dance is not the same as a man actively seeking out a woman to dance with. I disagreed, saying that if it's acceptable for her, it should be the same for me. She responded that if I ever did that, it would lead to a major fight, and she'd accuse me of cheating. Her reasoning is that, as a man, I would have pursued the woman, whereas as a woman, she is simply accepting an offer and can control the meaning behind it. I think it's BS. OP is not an AH, rather his wife is being cheap by dancing with another man on their rare date night. Her double standard is exposed when she admitted that she would feel jealous if the roles were reversed. So, I would rate OP 0 and OP's wife 2 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now move on to the next story from humble_donut_39. AITA for cutting ties with my mom and grandma after they lied about a COVID test and caused a COVID super spreader at our wedding. TLDR. My mom and grandma lied about a COVID test, and as a result, 1 by 3 of our guests are sick, our honeymoon was ruined, and my relationships with both women may be unsalvageable. Apologies in advance for a long post. I am really struggling emotionally to process and move past the events of the last 1.5 weeks surrounding our wedding. Not sure what I'm looking for, other than a platform to just get this all out there, because it's weighing heavily on me and my heart is broken. We just got back from our honeymoon in Mexico, which we spent a year saving for, and which was ruined after we tested positive for COVID while on the trip, as a result of decisions made by my mom and grandma, which I will detail below. About a year ago, my maternal grandma asked her cousin to officiate our wedding, without asking me first. This was someone with whom I had no relationship and had only met once prior. I had no desire for him to officiate our wedding, but went along with it, because in our family, grandma gets what grandma wants, or there's hell to pay. In fact, if you cross her, she will cry in her room, post something nasty about you on Facebook, and then write you off until you apologize, even if you've done nothing wrong. Spoilers. Fast forward to 1 week before our wedding. We learned that the cousin and our officiant and his wife had been exposed to COVID, and they were on their way to my grandma's house to stay for the week leading up to the wedding. My out-of-state parents and brother were staying there as well, and my dad and brother made the decision to get out of there to avoid getting sick and came to stay with my fiance and me. We all voiced our concerns and made it clear to my mom and grandma that it was a bad idea to host people who had had a COVID exposure a few days before our wedding and were met with the most pathetic display of immaturity and selfishness by my grandmother and mom. My grandma started crying and saying they would all boycott our wedding if we were that worried about COVID, which in 2024 is just a cold. Absolutely zero attempt was made to acknowledge our concerns about public health at our own event. For some additional backstory, my maternal grandmother has always acted this way, and all 4 of her children blindly give in to her antics, but especially my mom. And all of them have displayed an extremely frustrating denial of science, which has been gotten worse with the political conflict swirling in our family with the upcoming election. Anyway, my fiance and I insisted that both our officiant and his wife take a COVID rapid test before we would allow them to come to the wedding. I contacted the venue and had a backup officiant lined up. I personally gave my mom 2 rapid tests and asked her make sure both the officiant and his wife tested negative on Friday morning, the day of the rehearsal dinner. My mom texted me, "The lepers are clean." I called her and asked point blank, "Mom, do you swear that both our officiant and his wife tested negative? And she swore to me that they had. So I called the venue and cancelled the backup officiant, and we went ahead with the wedding weekend. Everything went perfectly. Our wedding was everything I dreamed. The only tainted memories I will carry with me forever are the ones of my grandma acting cold and standoffish to me at our rehearsal dinner and the entire wedding day because I had the audacity to insult her. I'll never forget the way she treated me. Fast forward to the Monday after the wedding. We were headed to the airport to fly to Mexico for our honeymoon and caught wind from my mom that my grandma had come down with a cold. I told her to make sure she tests for COVID, as that would be the obvious assumption for anyone with 2 brain cells. We landed in Mexico and were just happy to be there to enjoy. Then all hell broke loose. We found out while in Mexico that my grandma had hosted my other grandparents, Dad's side, for dinner the night we left, while actively symptomatic, and they were both now COVID positive. Then the truth slowly started coming to light, and we learned that my mom had lied to me about our officiant and his wife both testing negative. Only our officiant had tested. His wife had the sniffles, and they knew if she tested positive I'd throw a wrench in their plans, so they just didn't test her. I got more upset than I've ever been in my life, and texted my mom that we were feeling completely betrayed, and that at the very least my grandma owes an apology to my dad's parents for getting them sick. In return, I got a screenshot from my brother showing that my grandma had texted him, "Tell your sister when I die, she can put selfish bitch who ruined my honeymoon on my headstone." All in all, 26 people are sick, more than 1/3 of our guests. Some are very severely ill. My dad has it the worst. He called me last night to ask how to know it's time to go to the hospital for labored breathing. My mom is denying that she lied. My grandma is texting the entire family trying to get them on her side, and I'm being told I'm overreacting because I'm brainwashed by the leftist media. I had a meltdown on our honeymoon and just sobbed into my new husband's lap for an hour. I don't know how to move past this, or whether I ever want to speak to my mom or grandma again. I feel like COVID aside, they chose to prioritize their own experience at the expense of nearly 30 other people, including us, the wedding couple. I will never forget this betrayal, and I just don't know what to do. I'm mourning the aftermath of my own wedding. OP is certainly not an AH. Instead, her mom and grandma are extremely selfish, and AH for disregarding others' health. Their negligence endangered the lives of many and ruined OP's honeymoon, and now they expect OP to behave normally, which seems impossible. Her frustration is inevitable, and breaking ties with her mom and grandma is 100% justified. They are really AH and deserve at least a 3.5 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now jump onto the next story from accurate_gain_7272. AITA for kicking my husband out of the house after he disrespected our daughter. I, 28F, have been married to my husband Steve, 38M, for 5 years. He has 2 children, Jake, 10M, and Mia, 16F. Steve and Mia have always had a complicated relationship, but things have taken a turn for the worse recently. She and I have a great relationship. Both Jake and Mia call me mom even though I'm their stepmom, and I love them both. Their mother gave up her parental rights. I formally adopted Mia on her 14th birthday and Jake on his 10th birthday. A few months ago, Mia came out as a lesbian. I was incredibly proud of her for having the courage to be open about her identity. But Steve's reaction was anything but supportive. He became distant and cold toward Mia, making snide comments and creating a generally hostile environment. I tried talking to him about it, but he insisted that Mia was just going through a phase and that she needed tough love. Tonight, things came to a head. Mia invited her girlfriend over for dinner, and Steve lost it. He started yelling at Mia, calling her names and saying that she was an embarrassment to the family. He told her that she was no longer welcome in our home if she continued this lifestyle. I was furious. I told Steve that he was being unreasonable and that he needed to leave. He refused, so I packed a bag for him and told him to stay with his brother until he could sort out his feelings. I said, "I am the sole owner of this household, and you have no say over whether or not my daughter can stay in the house I own." He stormed out, calling me a traitor and accusing me of choosing Mia over our marriage. I own my house outright because my parents had willed it to me, and they passed away in a car accident 6 years ago. Steve has been sending me angry messages, accusing me of breaking up our family. His family has also been calling, saying that I overreacted and that Mia needs to respect her father's rules. I feel torn because I believe I did the right thing by protecting Mia, but I also worry about the impact this is having on Jake and our family as a whole. I also feel bad for throwing it in his face that I'm the sole owner of the house. Update. Well, as you could imagine, everything got so much worse. To recap, I, 32F, kicked my husband, 33M, out a couple of weeks ago. He was always berating and belittling me. He is unemployed due to a car accident that he had several years ago, and he refused to do anything. When he cleaned, he would pick up the living room, where the two little kids, 3F and 8-month-old F, would play, and he would rarely do that. Instead, he expected me to work my 10-hour shifts, come home, clean the house, wake up in the morning, get all 3 kids ready for school, then go to work. On my days off, I would spend them taking kids to doctors, forcing him to go to his doctor appointments, do the grocery shopping, the laundry, and everything. And when I didn't help him clean, I would get treated like trash and that because I wasn't doing anything. Well, he finally left a week ago, and it has just been awful. He didn't go to his sister's like I told him to do. Instead, he has apparently been staying in the wooded area behind my house. I live on 2 acres. He has come up to my house several times and left notes on my door trying to make me feel bad for him. Well, the notes weren't getting him anywhere, and now he has progressed to banging on my doors and the sides of my house. My best friend offered to come stay the weekend with me to help actually get my house cleaned, and while I was at work on Saturday, they would clean up some more for me. Well, while I was at work, he started with the banging and he was pissed, threw his wallet at my friend and said, "I won't be needing this where I'm going," and then continued to bang on my house until I came home early and called the police. They came out, talked to him to see if he would be willing to go with medics to a mental hospital. Shocker, he didn't go, and the police couldn't make him go. Instead, he just kept drinking beers one after the other. No clue exactly where he got the beers, as he has no access to my money in any way, and I didn't buy them for him. And last night, while I had just got the 2 younger ones to sleep, thankfully my 11-year-old daughter was at her bio dad's, he started banging again, woke up the 8-month-old, scared the out of me and my friend who was in the living room. I called the police again. They came out, looked for him, and couldn't find him anywhere. The police suggested that I go somewhere else for the night at least. Thankfully, my parents don't live very far from me at all, and so we went and stayed with my parents. But as of right now, that's what is happening, and I have no clue what to do at the moment. OP is certainly not an AH for protecting her daughter from her husband's toxic behavior. It is not an overreaction. Instead, it is standing up for the well-being of her children. She did the right thing by prioritizing her children's well-being and creating a safe environment for them. OP is not an AH and deserves 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. On the other hand, OP's husband is a big AH, and I would rate him 2.5 on the AH scale. Let's now jump on to the next story from gold_wind_5888 AITA for crying. When my boyfriend let his best friend's wife alter the dish I made for dinner? My boyfriend, 28M, and I, 22F, met at work 2 years ago. Technically, I was working part-time during undergrad, and he was a customer, but after a couple of months, we started going out. I really love this man, and nothing has happened on this scale before, so I'm very confused about it. My BF has a very tight group of friends. I am well acquainted with them, and their girlfriends. One of them, Dave, just is married to Ellie, fake names. Ellie is an excellent cook and often hosts dinners, and everyone brings a dessert to those dinners. I am the youngest in the group, so most times they brush off my requests for contributing or bringing in a dessert. However, the last time I asked Dave and Ellie if they wanted anything extra like wine or some sweet dish for dinner, they said I could bring one of those sweet dishes I make for my boyfriend. I'm Indian, and even though I can't cook as well as my mom, and I'm well, in a different country for studies, I called my mom up and had her teach me properly how to make a specific Bengali sweet, which is my favorite. I had my friends taste it, and they said it was great. My boyfriend ate some and said it was excellent. Except, last night, I greeted Ellie and kept the dish in the kitchen. When the food was brought out and my boyfriend told everyone I made it, I saw that someone had added cinnamon powder to the sweet. You never have the sweet with cinnamon powder. The dessert tasted like cinnamon, and I felt horrible. Though everyone said thank you, and it was good, I think my face gave it away. And my boyfriend took me aside and said that Ellie had told him that my sweet looked too white and thought some cinnamon might bring some color into it. I don't know. I just felt awful, and I started to tear up. My boyfriend then defended Ellie and said that his friends already think I'm a child and not make a big deal of this, and we will talk about it. I told him Ellie asked him first. Couldn't he have told her not to add cinnamon to the sweet? He told me he didn't think it was a big deal and asked me to drop the topic on the way home. I didn't text him goodnight, and this morning he said he was sorry and said my crying made him feel like an awful person. I don't know, now I think I overreacted. AITA? Update. Ellie saw this post. My boyfriend texted me to see if it was me. I said yes. He said we needed to talk. For safety purposes, my best friend will be here. I don't know. I never expected my post to blow up. Update. He said he needed space from the relationship. I think with the way this post blew up and what happened because of a post, I should clear up some things. I never asked if I should leave my boyfriend for this. I asked if this was an overreaction, my crying. But having thousands of people tell me this was racially charged, Ellie wanted power, my BF is etc. My brain went haywire. Boyfriend called yesterday, and when I got there, his house with my best friend, Dave and Ellie were there. Ellie was crying and Dave looked really pissed at me. My BF told me to sit down and Dave started with, how could I make a post that most of the people in the dinner party would recognize and know, and could shame Ellie and my BF? My BF was silent and wouldn't even look at me, and was only shaking his head. It felt like I was a kid, being scolded by my parents with my elder sibling disappointed in my actions. That is what I felt, and it looked. I admit, it was very spineless of me, but Dave went on for like a minute, and I was just looking at my BF, waiting for him to defend me. I asked Ellie, why would she alter my dish, after telling me to bring an Indian dish? She said she thought Indian food would be brown. This woman has more Indian friends than me, and she thinks Indian food is brown. She grew up in the UK, FFs, and I felt so defeated. The comments, my friends, and people around me telling me his friends came first to him, not me. He said he didn't think the sweet was a big deal. I told him I would never let my friend alter something he spent 3 days learning, getting people to taste it, and got his mom involved in. He saw I put a lot of effort into it, so why let her alter it? Why couldn't he ask me? Ellie started to cry and say that she wasn't being racist and she wouldn't know that I put effort into it, and now she couldn't host dinners again. I said I used fake names, so why does it matter? Unless she and Dave went around telling people. BF told me he didn't expect this from me. My best friend piped up that he expected that my BF would have a spine, so I guess they were both disappointed. My, for example, now ex BF told me in front of Dave and Ellie that he needs some space. I told him to get lost. I don't know what my best friend said to him after that, considering I left BF's flat. I kind of tripped in the metro station, so now I'm crying on my best friend's couch with an ice pack, while his BF keeps giving me peach schnapps, and my relationship has toppled over. I wouldn't have stormed out had he looked at me once. He just looked 100% on Dave and Ellie's side and acted like I was the one with the problem when she caused me hurt. If his friends come first when they cause me hurt, where would I have been if I decided to marry this man? My friends are good to me and are acting like I'm some fragile glass. I even heard my best friend and his brother whispering loudly from the kitchen, and his elder brother wanting to threaten him via Instagram DMs. I hate that this has come to this, considering I have always been the mom friend to my friend group. I'm drunk while writing this, so have some grace in the comments. Also, if you'll be an incel like those people in my DMs telling me I'll never keep a man if I'm this dramatic, please go away. I just thought I needed to update, that's it. Thanks, guys. Edit. Guys, this is the first time I've faced what you all have been calling racism. TBH, I didn't see Ellie putting cinnamon into my roseola as racism. I was just hurt that my days of hard work was ruined, that's it. I understand I need to work on my self-esteem and not let people walk over me. My best friend's elder brother, he's a doctor, and is super pissed at my ex because he didn't know what happened, booked an appointment with a therapist he knows, as he thinks I need mental help to not normalize aggressive behavior. I'm sorry for ranting on Reddit, but I guess that's where I am. Both my best friend and I will be going. He had been there for some time before. And the situation is tense at home because Dada, Bestie's brother, didn't know what was happening and tore my friends a new one for not protesting when Dave said it to me. I still haven't told him it was over a Reddit post and that I'm writing heretic feel awful, and I don't know how to tell my mum she was right. I wish I never went out with him. One of my ex's friends, from the dinner party, asked me if I really left my ex over a dessert, so I guess that's what he told people. It hurts. I know it shouldn't, but it hurts. I think it is partially my fault. I shouldn't have let myself be treated like this. There were signs, and I ignored them. And now I think I'll never have another relationship because it feels like a horrible, anxious feeling. OP is certainly not an AH here because Ellie threw cold water on her efforts. It is not about dessert. It is about the culture. It is disregarding the culture of OP. If you don't like Bengali dessert, don't eat it. You cannot just add anything to it. It is really disrespectful. OP is justified here, and I would rate her 0 out of 5 on the AH scale, and Ellie gets 1.5. As for OP's husband, he is being unsupportive to his partner, so he is also an AH, and I would give him at least 2 out of 5. What AITA for refusing to give my molester brother a character letter to help his court trail after what he did to a friend's daughter? I, 28F, have a brother, 31M, who is looking at serving time in prison for intimate relations with a minor, 14F, who is one of my friend's daughter. This has been going on for months, as evidence states, and we only found out a few weeks ago. When I found out about this, I had a discussion with my friend and apologized for what happened, but understandably, she wants space. I have also cut off my brother, as this whole situation is just disgusting to me. My parents, however, have stayed by his side and are trying to say the only reason he did what he did is because he has autism and didn't know what he was doing was wrong. Despite them being shown text messages where he states himself that what he was doing was bad and he could be sent to prison for it. However, after they spoke to my brother's lawyer, he stated that we could each write up a character letter to be presented for him in court so the judge can have better understanding of who is beside the incident, but I refused because I don't think he deserves it. I am currently 6 months pregnant, and I don't want my daughter to be around/grow up with a man like my brother. I've spoken to my husband about this for another opinion, and he agrees with me not submitting a character letter. But we are thinking of talking to the children that my brother was around in the family, just to make sure that he hasn't done anything to them. My mother is dying, and she says she doesn't want to pass while her son is serving time in prison for something, in her words, that wasn't that bad. Both her and my father are pressuring me to do this, and seeing them so upset is hard for me, but whenever I even think about doing it makes me sick. I just wanted to ask for everyone else's opinion on what I should do. I and my brother were extremely close up until this point, which I think is making this harder for me. Should I cut out my parents too? Should I make the letter? Edit. Hello everyone again. I have no idea how to make updates that lets everyone know the same time, but I'll keep it short. I wish I could reply to all comments, but I'm so tired all the time, I have no energy for it. And I really don't want to keep stressing myself out with the pregnancy. But I have read so many, and thank everyone for their responses. I have cut off my parents because I 100% do not support anyone who enables rapists, and that's who they are. Sadly. It was hard because I did want my baby to grow with 2 sets of grandparents, but I still have my husband's parents, so I'll be okay eventually with this huge loss. I am also not writing a letter, even if it is to say how terrible I think the situation is. I just want to cut everyone off and focus on my husband and my baby. OP is certainly not an AH, and what she did is 100% justified. She is absolutely right in standing against her brother, who is a molester, and her parents who are enabling his actions. OP and people like her are the beacons of hope in our hypocritical society. If someone else had done such a mean thing, OP's parents would have been on the streets chanting for strict consequences. However, when it came to their own son, they put the blame on autism, despite knowing the facts that their son did all this on purpose. RIP American values. As for scores, I would give OP 0 and OP's brother 5 out of 5 on the AH scale. OP's parents are also AHs, so I would give them 3.5 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now jump on to the next story from Logical Blueberry 5. AITA for moving on so quickly after my husband left me. My 47F husband, 47M, asked for a separation on our 14th anniversary, while we were away in a foreign country to celebrate. While we weren't as close as we used to be, we almost never fought and generally enjoyed each other's company and families. We do not have any children. The night before our anniversary, he brought up he wasn't very happy in the relationship, but didn't know why. The next morning, I asked to see his phone, and he said no. He said I would find flirty messages with one or more other women on it. He had made some female friends through school and work, and he said he felt like there might be someone out there who was a better fit for him. I said I did not want to do a trial separation, as I don't believe you can work on something if you aren't living together. If he wanted to separate, it would be final. He understood, but said it was something he had to do. After being away for only 2 days, we rebooked our flights home, flew home, and he packed some belongings and left. 7 days later, he asked to come home, and we started marriage counseling. He had a lot of trouble admitting he had at least one emotional affair. The counseling was not helpful. He was defensive and not open to it. I suspect something physical happened with the other woman, but I do not have any proof. He had deleted all his flirty texts, Snapchat, etc., so I could not see them. After 4 weeks of living together again and attending counseling sessions, he decided he no longer wanted to try to save the marriage, and he was leaving. He packed up and left a few hours later. He stayed with a friend, found a new apartment, and signed a 1-year lease. I was devastated, and even had to take time off work to process what had happened and attend individual counseling. After 4 weeks, I started to feel a bit better. I went out for drinks with a group of 4 coworkers that live in my area and found I really enjoyed one of them, 42M, a lot. I had only met him over Zoom before this. We started seeing each other a couple of times a week. Quite quickly, it grew into a truly amazing, loving relationship. I've stayed in counseling throughout, as it wasn't easy to process the sudden ending of my long-term marriage at the same time as beginning something new. It's been about 7 months now. My ex-husband eventually decided he wanted to try to save the marriage again, but I declined. He says I'm TA for starting a new relationship so quickly, within 6 weeks of him leaving. Our relationship was over as I can no longer trust him, and he has hurt me immensely. I do not want a relationship with someone I cannot trust. Am I TA for moving on? Update. I am not sure how to provide an update, so I hope this is right. The biggest update is that my ex-husband, 48M, and I, 47F, are finally officially divorced. We split everything equally, and I bought him out of the family home. Thankfully, the divorce process was quick and easy once we waited the mandatory separation period for our state. When signing the divorce papers, he asked if I was sure I wanted to proceed, notably while he was seeing someone else. He wanted to try again, if I was willing. I wasn't, and thankfully he didn't fight it or make the divorce process more difficult in any way. My ex has been seeing this woman for quite a while now. I know he knew her before we split, but I do not know if he cheated with her or not. It doesn't matter to me. I wish them the best. My relationship with my new partner, 42M, has continued to be amazing. It's the best relationship I've ever been in, and I can honestly say I've never been happier. He is kind, loving, and a great communicator. We moved in together a while back, and a few months later, we became engaged. We plan to elope sometime in the next year. While it may seem crazy, I am extremely grateful for my ex's cheating and the following heartbreak. Without it, I may not have found the happiness I have today. OP is certainly not an AH for moving on quickly, because she has every right to seek happiness for herself. There is nothing wrong with it. On the other hand, OP's husband seems to be a weird person for being so volatile. One day, he wants separation, and the next moment he wants to try again. I don't understand. What the heck is this? To me, he is an AH, and I would give him 2.5 out of 5 on the AH scale, and OP gets nothing. Let's now jump onto the next story from technical_pressure13. AITA for asking a woman to quit touching me? Recently, I visited my local bar/restaurant, where I've been going about once every 2 weeks for dinner and drinks over the past 2 years. While I'm not a regular, the staff and some patrons recognize me and often come to chat. I'm not the best looking guy, but I work hard at the gym and take care of myself. On my last visit, I was sitting alone at the bar, engrossed in my phone, when a woman, early 40s, sat down beside me. Initially, I didn't pay much attention to her until she asked if I was going to talk to her or just stare at my phone all night. I was caught off guard and apologized, explaining I didn't realize she wanted to chat. She then asked me to buy her a drink, which I declined because I have a fiance, and told her that would be inappropriate. After walking away, she returned and started rubbing my shoulders. I pulled away and asked what she was doing. She claimed I looked tense and was just trying to help. I brushed it off, thinking she might have had a few drinks. However, she continued to touch my arms and even my beard while getting close to my face. I politely asked her to stop, emphasizing that it made me uncomfortable, especially considering I have a fiance. She apologized and said she would stop, but about 20 minutes later, she came back and grabbed my upper thigh while trying to move her hand to my privates. In response, I scooted my seat back and said, somewhat loudly to ensure the bartender heard, "I asked you nicely to please not touch me, so quit touching me." I didn't mean to sound aggressive, just firm. After that, I decided to cash out and leave. A couple of weeks later, I returned for my usual dinner and drinks. As soon as I walked in, the regulars fell silent. The bartender was short with me and slid the menu my way without saying a word. I thought he was just having a bad night. Then, a gentleman approached me and said it was messed up how I treated the woman weeks before. I was shocked and asked him to clarify. He said I shouldn't have raised my voice at her for accidentally brushing up against my arm. I tried to explain my side, but it felt like no one was listening. I noticed the atmosphere had shifted, and I felt completely iced out at my favorite spot. As I left, I overheard a couple of people muttering, "asshole" and "scumbag." Now I'm wondering, am I the asshole in this situation? I don't think I can go back after this, and I really don't understand what I did wrong. OP is not the AH for setting his boundaries. The woman is an AH for touching OP repeatedly in public and without OP's permission. Consent is a must for touching someone. OP's reaction is appropriate and justified. So, OP is not an AH, and I would give him 0 out of 5 on the AH scale, and that woman gets at least 2.5 on the AH scale. One more thing is that the negative reaction from the bar staff is unfair and unjustified. So, the bar staff are also AHs, and I would give them 3.5 on the AH scale. Let's now jump on to the next story from Captain C00TS. AITA, for telling my brothers I won't be the one to be our mom's caretaker. I'm one of 3 boys. I'm 35, and my brothers are 26 and 23. It started when the 26-year-old asked who is going to take care of our mom when she's nearing the end of her life. I stayed quiet because I have an extremely strained relationship with our mom. When I was 14, my mom cheated on my dad with his best friend, and she kicked him out of the house she inherited from my grandparents. She was a drug addict, had her car repossessed, couldn't pay her bills, so I was doing homework in candlelight and taking cold showers. I got beaten one time because I found her drugs and flushed them down the toilet in front of her. During my junior and senior years, she was dating different guys, leaving at night when we were all asleep, and then coming home in the morning after I was awake, getting ready for school, and getting my brothers ready for school. She would always say, I had to run to the store really quick, but I would be awake in the middle of the night when she would leave. My mom is clean now, but she's a functioning alcoholic. She put my dad into massive credit card debt, leading up to their split due to her drug problems. Neither of my parents have retirement savings. My mom still works at 65 years old as a hairdresser. She is going to have to continue working until her arms and legs won't let her anymore. My brothers have extremely rose-tinted glasses for their childhood. They thought it was amazing. They remember me always hanging out with them, letting them sleep in my room, playing video games, taking them to get lunch and stuff. They didn't see all of the stuff that was going on with our mom because they were too young. They know about everything now, but they don't hold the same resentment for our mom that I do. Because of my strained relationship with my mom, I got a vasectomy. My wife and I don't want kids because we don't want another life to be our responsibility. I've had my fair share of raising kids with my brothers. So when I finally told them we don't have any obligation to take care of our parents, they made their decisions and have to deal with them. And if they can't financially take care of themselves, that's their problem. I even said, whoever wants to move in with mom and take care of her can have the house after she dies. I will help by taking her to the grocery store, making sure she has things she needs, but I won't take care of her. They called me cold and selfish, and that they knew I didn't have that caretaker mentality. I love my brothers. They are 2 of the most important people in the world to me, but our mom has been exhausting to have in my life. Am I the asshole because I refuse to take care of my mom when she needs end-of-life care? This post is long, and I feel like I jumped all over the place. I'm sorry. Update. I sent my brothers this text to tell me I don't have that caretaker instinct when I took care of you guys growing up. Even after I moved out, I bought you guys school clothes and stuff. I was there while Mom was off messing around in the middle of the night. I was there taking care of you when you woke up crying because Mom wasn't home, and I sat with you while you fell back asleep. I woke you guys up in the mornings to help you get ready for school. I stayed with you guys while Mom and Sissy were doing drugs. I watched you over weekends. I fed you lunches and dinners. I let you guys sleep in my room when we didn't have power because Mom couldn't afford the electric bill. I was the only one with a car in the family, and I took you guys to and from school while also dropping Mom off at work and picking her up while going to college and working. I did my part in taking care of her. I helped raise you guys, but you don't see it that way because you were too young. I had to grow up way too fast, so please don't make me feel guilty because I don't want to be Mom's caretaker when I feel like I did my part when I was younger taking care of you guys for her. If it was either of you needing caretaking, that's a different story. I parented you guys growing up. I was there a lot when our parents weren't. I love you guys, and I don't hold you guys responsible, and I would do it all over again if I needed to. This was the 26-year-old's response. I am not trying to make you feel guilty, and wasn't trying to say you didn't take care of us. I shouldn't have said you don't have the caretaker instinct. I was thinking of it in a parental aspect, since you literally said you don't have a kid because you don't want responsibility for anyone else. I wasn't trying to make it sound like you didn't take care of us, and they left it at that. I'm going to stand my ground. I think I'll also have this conversation with my mom to let her know. My 23-year-old brother is her favorite and perfect son. He has the best relationship with her and still lives with her. And he said he's already accepted he's probably the one who is going to take care of her. But the next time the three of us are in the same place, we will sit down and have a real conversation about why I won't be the caretaker. But I'm willing to talk about other solutions. Thank you all for the amazing responses. I probably will seek out therapy. I've never heard of prettification and probably do have a lot of things I need to work out. Thank you all. OP is not the AH. Given his traumatic upbringing, he has already taken on immense responsibility raising his brothers and managing his mom's neglect. His decision to prioritize his well-being and set boundaries regarding future care is valid. It's reasonable for OP to expect other family members to step up now, given the circumstances. So, OP is not an AH here, and I would rate him 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. OP's brothers are being AHs here, and I would rate each of them 1.5 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now jump onto the next story form, Katie's _ 1156-222. AITA for ruining my best friend's wedding? My husband Mark and I were together for 4 years before I found out he was cheating on me. Everything was perfect, and then one evening he sat me on the sofa and told me about his affair. I could not believe it. I just got up and packed my stuff. I drove straight to my best friend Amy's house. We have been best friends since we were 5. I told her everything that happened, and she told me I could stay with her as long as I needed since Mark and I lived together, and I needed some time to find a place to move into. When she and her boyfriend Alex announced they were getting married, she asked me if I would be her maid of honor. I'm not going to lie, it was such a stressful time for me as I was working full-time and helping plan this wedding. Don't get me wrong, I felt so honored, but I was exhausted. She told me that she always wanted to have her wedding in a big open field with trees everywhere and around nature, and it so happened that my parents owned a ranch, so I asked if we could throw the wedding there. Obviously, since Amy had been a part of our family for so long, she was like an adopted daughter, so my parents were more than happy to have her wedding there. The evening before the wedding, I was busy putting up some decorations when one of the bridesmaids approached me. I did not know this girl. I think she was a coworker of Amy's. She walked up to me and told me she was so impressed with me that despite everything, I was still willing to help Amy with her wedding. I was like, sorry. She then went on to tell me that she knew that my best friend Amy had slept with my husband Mark. Just take your mind back to that affair he had been having. In perfect timing, Amy's soon-to-be husband, Alex, came around the corner. I asked if he knew about this, and he told me that he did, in fact, know. Amy had told him because she didn't want to go through the marriage with any secrets. He said he made a promise to himself that after their honeymoon, he would tell me the truth. He had forgiven Amy and asked me to do the same. I had no clue what to say, so I got into my car and drove to my parents' house and told them everything that happened. They too were absolutely stunned. They couldn't believe it. That afternoon, I got a call from Amy. I got at least 100 more phone calls from her, and then it started with Alex trying to call me, and then it progressed to numbers I didn't even know. I finally found out on Facebook that my parents had thrown their entire wedding off their property. The wedding hadn't even taken place at all, and now Alex and Amy were both bad-mouthing me all over the place. But my parents said they didn't care. Anyone who asked why got the truth, which quickly had people siding with me. But I still get the occasional, "it wasn't a big deal," "it was a one-time thing," or "you're over-exaggerating" from our mutual friends. So tell me what you all think. Was I exaggerating? Or should I have handled it better? I don't know. Edit. I have read all of your kind comments and have decided to drop those mutual friends of mine who defended Amy. I am currently healing through this as I have just lost a best friend of 22 years. But don't worry, I have thanked my parents profusely for how they protected me. OP is certainly not an AH for standing up to her friend. In fact, she didn't ruin her friend's wedding. Rather, her friend ruined his life, and after all that, she was being a hypocrite. So, OP is not an AH, and I would rate her 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. Instead, OP's husband and her friend Amy are AHs. Amy is the bigger AH, so I would rate her 4 out of 5 on the AH scale, and OP's husband gets 3.5 on the AH scale. Let's now jump onto the next story from I Am Wyvern Girl. AITA for telling my sister I hooked up with her fiance and ruining her engagement, even though she took him back. I, 19F, come from a super religious family where everyone marries fast through matchmakers. I'm the black sheep because I left religion and started dating casually. My sister Marie, 25F, is the family favorite, beautiful, smart, and outgoing, but she struggled to find a husband. After a string of failed matches, she finally got engaged last month to Christopher, 30M. Everyone was relieved because she'd been trying for so long. I was happy for her, until I met the fiance. Christopher and I hooked up last year. For context, the age gap between us isn't the issue, so please don't bring it up. We met at a party, and despite being religious, he's divorced and didn't seem concerned about staying pure. We hooked up 5 times. He was my first everything. Kiss, hook up, all of it. After the 5th time, he said he was falling for me, but I wasn't looking for anything serious, so I ended things before it got too complicated. Especially because I knew he wanted to eventually get remarried, and I was not the girl for that. We hadn't seen each other since, until Marie brought him home as her fiancé. The second we locked eyes, I knew we were both thinking, oh shit. Later that night, Christopher pulled me aside, begging me not to tell Marie. He said it meant nothing, it was in the past, and telling her would only ruin her happiness. He texted and called me for a week, saying how much Marie had been through and how I'd destroy her life if I told her. I kept my mouth shut at first. I didn't want to hurt her. But the guilt was eating me alive, like I was watching her walk into a disaster. I felt like she deserved to know. So, I told her. At first, Marie didn't believe me. She said I was trying to sabotage her happiness because I couldn't stand being single. I had to show her the texts and photos to prove it. When she finally accepted the truth, she lost it. She confronted Christopher, and he denied everything, until she shoved the evidence in his face. Marie called off the engagement. That's when things really hit the fan. My parents and some relatives told me I should have kept quiet. They said I'd ruined Marie's one shot at happiness, and called me selfish for interfering. Now I'm not even invited to the wedding. Yep, they got back together, but I'll get to that. It gets worse. While Marie and Christopher were dating, he randomly called me, saying he wanted to reconnect. He was rather vague, but it was obviously a booty call. I didn't know he was dating at the time, and definitely didn't know he was dating my sister. I let him down firmly, and didn't engage because I had no interest. After telling Marie about our hookup, I mentioned this call because I thought she should know he wasn't as faithful while they were dating as she thought he was. But that backfired spectacularly. Marie accused me of making up lies to tear them apart. Christopher denied everything and said I was obsessed with him. Marie sided with him and called me, quote, a desperate home-wrecking whore. Since I deleted my call history, I had no proof. It became a he said, she said situation, and Marie believed him. Now, Marie and Christopher are back together, and they're getting married. She showed up at my apartment a few weeks after the fight, crying. Apparently, Christopher convinced her that what happened between us was just a meaningless mistake, and that it made him realize how much he wanted to be with her. I tried to explain that he had told me he was falling for me, not to make it seem like he still liked me, just to show her he's lying to her about what he felt for me. But she just got angrier and called me a jealous liar and some other pretty names I won't repeat before storming out. Now I'm completely cut off from family events. My parents say I've caused enough damage, and extended family members are calling me a slut, both behind my back and to my face. Every attempt I've made to explain myself has been shut down. So, yeah, they're getting married anyway. And here I am, wondering if I just blew up her engagement for nothing. Should I have just stayed quiet? Did I do the right thing? Or did I just ruin my relationship with my family for no reason? OP is not the AH for telling her sister about the hookup with Christopher. Marie deserves to know the truth about her fiance, especially given the betrayal. While it's unfortunate that Marie took him back, OP's intention was to protect her sister from future heartbreak. The family's reaction reflects their biases, not OP's actions. As for scores, I would rate OP 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now jump on to the next story form, expert_anybody2366. AITA for refusing to take care of my wife since she caught the flu from having sex with her affair partner. This is partially a rant, and partially an actual question. I, 54M, have been married to my wife, Victoria, 54F, for over 32 years. We have 3 adult daughters and 1 adult son. Early this year, she started menopause. I loved her and supported her throughout this difficult time. She said she didn't want to have because she felt like she's fat and ugly. I told her she's beautiful, and I was patient with her as she said she didn't want. It was only since this month that she wanted us to have sex again. I thought things were getting better until I saw a condom wrapper in our bedroom. My job involves going out of town for business trips. This last trip, I tried to get into my wife's social media, and luckily enough, she used someone's birthday as the password. I found out her affair partner is Zachary, 35M, a family friend who has a wife, 29F. So on my trip, I read so many messages. One message involved Zachary asking if it's okay to come over for their fun time since he thinks he's coming down with something. Even after getting back in town, I read some messages. Zachary messaged that he and his wife have the flu, so he can't see my wife for a while. My wife said that herself getting the flu was worth it. I came home to my wife, who's suffering from the flu. I immediately told her that I know about her and Zachary. She was upset but too weak from the flu to stop me from packing and leaving. She begged me to not leave her alone while she's sick. After I left, my wife has been messaging me. She said she's very sick. I told her to go to the doctor, call an ambulance, or call someone else. She said she's not dying, but she needs me. She said she can't call our kids nor any other family member, since they'll ask why I'm not there. She said that menopause had made her crazy and that she wouldn't see Zachary anymore. I still haven't gone back. AITA. Edit. As soon as I found the messages, I was planning on telling Zach's wife. I wanted to tell her face to face. I wanted to spare our adult kids the horrible news, but many in the comments made a good point that my wife could lie to our kids. So I called Zach's wife first. I don't know what's going on in their marriage because she believed me right away. I called my kids and talked to them like a conference call. I had to unfortunately send some proof to them. I didn't go overboard, just enough for them to believe me. Obviously, they're all upset. I tried to keep it together, as I don't want to vent about their mother to them. Second edit. Zach's wife has been messaging me last night and this morning. She was planning on leaving Zachary anyway, because Zachary was sleeping with 2 other women. But the fact that Victoria is a married woman who is like a family member speeds things up. Zach's wife made Zachary leave the house. Also, all my kids have called their mother. They're not buying any of their mom's excuses. They all want me to divorce her. OP is certainly not an AH for refusing to take care of his cheating wife. However, OP is a big AH for still being married to his cheating wife. I cannot believe OP is still with his wife because cheating is the ultimate deal breaker in a relationship. Whatever, it's OP's choice. As for scores according to the question asked, OP is not an AH, and I would rate him 0 out of 5 on the AH scale, and OP's wife is an AH for expecting her husband to take care of her after doing all this, so I would rate her 4 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now jump on to the next and the last story for this video from Accomplished Rain 9. AITA for telling my dad that he has ruined our family legacy. My parents raised me, 33M, and my sister in Western Canada. But after attending university, both of us have since moved away. I now live in the UK, and my sister lives on the opposite coast of Canada. My dad's family has always been upper middle class, and the centerpiece of his family was an old farmhouse about an hour outside of a major city that my great-grandfather built. This means I was part of the 5th generation to be there. It was modestly sized with 3 bedrooms over 2 floors, not some massive mansion in the countryside. It sat on less than an acre of land. That being said, it's been the family meeting spot for literally generations. My grandparents lived there until they died. This is where my sister and I spent hundreds of days in our childhood. Although my dad's family wasn't excessively wealthy, there was always this idea of preserving something for the next generation to make life a bit easier. My grandfather was generous and helped my parents often but sensibly, made sure that the family money was always growing. He would gift my parents weekends away and similar. My parents also massively benefited from this by having almost 50% of their first home being paid for by my dad's parents. My grandmother passed away, then eventually my grandfather did as well. He passed about 10 years ago now. After he passed away, my parents sold the farmhouse to create a new family meeting spot. At the time, my sister and I both fought this idea, but our parents did it anyway. If I had the funds, I would have bought it from them myself, but I had just left university so had no income. They insisted this would be best for everyone. With the money from this sale, my father retired about 5 years early, and they bought a piece of land on a remote island on one of Canada's many lakes. It's 4 hours from the nearest airport and only accessible by boat and only in the summer. There is no road access, and the lake partially freezes in the winter, which means you can't get there by boat. They built a cabin on this property, and it sleeps 4 people if you pull out the couch. They have been living at the cabin for the warm half of the year, and freeloading at my aunt and uncle's house for the rest. My parents recently asked me for a loan of several $1,000s, which I don't have, to expand their cabin to sleep more people so that we could all be together at the cabin. This idea disgusts me. My father inherited money that has been well cared for literally generations through moderate use, and he's already blown through it less than 10 years later. Between this remote cabin and taking early retirement, he and my mom have managed to use it all, and are now imposing on me to give them more money for a cabin that I will probably never use, as I live in the UK. Going to the old farmhouse was fine before, because it was much closer to an airport, could fit us all, and was accessible year-round. We can't even use this cabin for Christmas. The way I see it, my parents have completely ruined our family legacy because of their greed, and they can't even see it. If I ever have kids, they will never get to experience all the family history at the farmhouse like I did. My sister has a kid on the way, and we've already discussed how sad we are that the kid will never see the house. The idea of helping the next generation has ended with my parents, and this seems selfish to me. I told my parents this, and they told me that I was being entitled and selfish. I have had to work much harder to get where I am than my parents did. I have 2 degrees, have built my career over 3 continents, and have never taken money from my parents unless it was a gift for Christmas or my birthday. I paid my way through university with summer jobs and student loans. My parents both worked simple jobs and never went to university. Neither of my parents advanced their careers and stayed in pretty entry-level positions. I now believe that they've purposefully coasted through life because they knew they could afford to if they used the family money for retirement. AITA. OP is not an AH for expressing frustration over his parents' decisions regarding their family legacy. He has valid concerns about losing a meaningful family tradition and the financial implications of his parents' choices. However, the way he communicated his feelings is rude. So, for OP's behavior, I would rate him 1 out of 5 on the AH scale. What do the MacReddit fans think? Is the OP an AH or not? Let me know in the comment section below. If you like the stories I brought you, just hit the like button, share them as much as you can, And don't forget to subscribe to Mac Reddit for a daily dose. Bye-bye. See you tomorrow with some more spicy fries.